Have you ever felt your heart racing when a simple act of kindness unexpectedly led to the most passionate connection of your life? When a compassionate teenager offered a ride on his humble bike to a lost stranger, he couldn't possibly know this moment would spark an intense admiration in the heart of a powerful CEO searching for true love. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as Lucas Matthews pedaled his weathered bicycle through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge. The familiar squeak of the chain needed oil, but that would have to wait until his next paycheck. At 17, every dollar counted, especially when you were saving for college while helping your single mother make ends meet. His faded jeans and worn sneakers spoke of a life where luxuries were rare, but Lucas had never been one to complain. His mother had taught him that kindness cost nothing, and in a world that could be cruel, it was the most valuable currency. The neighborhood slowly transformed around him as he pedaled farther from the modest apartment complex where he lived. Small houses with chain-link fences gave way to manicured lawns, and eventually to the pristine streets of West Hill, where the elite of the city resided in mansions that seemed to touch the clouds. Lucas didn't belong here, but his job as a courier for speedy deliveries sometimes brought him to this part of town, delivering important documents that couldn't be trusted to email or regular mail. Lucas checked the address on his phone one more time. The package in his backpack needed to be delivered to 14-22 Hillcrest Avenue, the headquarters of Montgomery Innovations. He'd heard of the company before. Who hadn't? Their technological advancements in sustainable energy had revolutionized the industry, and their CEO was frequently featured in business magazines and news segments. Not that Lucas paid much attention to the business world. His concerns were more immediate: finish high school with good enough grades for a scholarship, keep his job, help his mom with bills, and maybe, if he was lucky, have enough time to sketch in his notebook when the day was done. As he approached the towering glass building that housed Montgomery Innovations, Lucas felt the familiar sense of displacement that always came when his humble world collided with spaces built for people with money and power. He locked his bike to a sleek metal rack, noticing how out of place his scratched and dented bicycle looked among the expensive cars in the parking lot. Straightening his t-shirt and running a hand through his dark curls in a futile attempt to look more presentable, he made his way to the entrance. The security guard at the front desk eyed him suspiciously as he approached. "Can I help you?" "I have a delivery for Ms. Montgomery," Lucas said, trying to sound professional despite his youth. "From Garrison Legal." The guard's expression softened slightly as Lucas presented his courier ID and the sealed envelope. After a brief phone call to verify, he directed Lucas to the executive elevator. "Top floor. Her assistant will meet you." The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like ascending to another world. The soft hum of the machinery was nothing like the groaning elevator in his apartment building that frequently broke down. When the doors opened, Lucas stepped into a space that seemed designed to intimidate, all glass, chrome, and stark white surfaces stretching into the distance. A woman with a sleek bob and glasses approached him. "The delivery from Garrison?" Lucas nodded, handing over the envelope and collecting the required signature. His job complete, he turned to leave, eager to escape this place where he felt so conspicuously out of place. He had 3 more deliveries to make before his shift ended, and his literature essay wouldn't write itself tonight. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Lucas exhaled in relief. These glimpses into how the other half lived always left him with complicated feelings. Not quite envy, but a wistfulness for what it might be like to move through the world without the constant weight of financial worry. Across town, Elise Montgomery stared at the documents her assistant had just delivered, but the words blurred before her eyes. At 35, she had achieved everything she had ever set out to accomplish professionally. Montgomery Innovations was revolutionizing clean energy storage. Their stock price had tripled in the past year, and she had just been named Businesswoman of the Year by Forbes. By any objective measure, she was a success. So why did she feel so empty? The vast office with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city suddenly felt like a beautiful prison. Elise stood, needing to move, to breathe air that wasn't filtered through the building's advanced HVAC system. Without explaining to her assistant, she grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator. "Ms. Montgomery? You're 3 o'clock with the board," her assistant called after her. "Reschedule it," Elise replied, not breaking stride. "Family emergency." It wasn't true, but it was the only excuse no one would question. Not that Elise had much family to have emergencies. Both parents gone, no siblings, divorced 3 years ago from a man who had seemed perfect on paper but had ultimately wanted a wife who would prioritize him over her company. The elevator whisked her downward, and minutes later she was walking briskly away from the building with no destination in mind. The unseasonably warm April day embraced her as she walked, removing her tailored blazer and letting the sun touch her bare arms. She had grown up in this city but rarely experienced it anymore. Her life had become a series of climate-controlled environments: her office, her car, her penthouse, exclusive restaurants, and boardrooms. When was the last time she had simply walked without purpose? Lost in thought, Elise paid little attention to her surroundings until she realized the neat grid of downtown had given way to unfamiliar streets. The well-maintained sidewalks had become cracked concrete, and the sleek skyscrapers had been replaced by modest storefronts and apartment buildings in need of repair. She had wandered into a part of the city she rarely visited, far from the sanitized environments she typically inhabited. Checking her phone, Elise realized the battery had died, likely because she'd forgotten to charge it last night after falling asleep reading quarterly reports. With no GPS and no familiar landmarks, she had to admit the unfamiliar truth to herself. She was lost. A glance at her watch, a handcrafted Swiss timepiece that cost more than some cars, told her it was nearly 5 o'clock. The board meeting she'd abandoned was probably just concluding, and her assistant would be frantically trying to reach her. The thought brought neither guilt nor concern, only a strange liberation. The sensation lasted until large raindrops began to fall from suddenly dark skies. Within seconds, the gentle shower became a downpour. Elise ducked under the awning of a small convenience store, cursing her luck and her impulsive decision to wander aimlessly through the city. Her silk blouse clung to her skin, and her carefully styled hair fell in damp strands around her face. The convenience store door opened, and the teenage clerk poked his head out. "You can come inside if you want, ma'am. Weather app says this'll last at least an hour." Elise nodded gratefully and stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the fluorescent lighting and the scent of coffee and processed food. She felt conspicuously out of place in her designer clothes, even rain-soaked as they were. The few other customers, an elderly man buying lottery tickets and a mother with a young child selecting snacks, glanced at her curiously before returning to their business. As Elise contemplated her limited options, the door chimed again. A young man entered, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. He pushed wet hair from his forehead, revealing a face that struck Elise as remarkably open and kind. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. "Man, it's really coming down out there," he said to the clerk, his voice carrying the easy confidence of youth. "Hey, Miguel, my bike chain's slipping again. Got any oil I could buy?" "Under the counter," the clerk replied. "Your usual?" The young man nodded, counting out crumpled bills from his pocket. It was then that he noticed Elise and offered a friendly smile that transformed his entire face. "Caught in the rain too, huh?" "Yes," Elise replied, surprised by the directness of his address. People rarely spoke to her without an agenda these days. "I wasn't expecting the weather to turn." He glanced at her silk blouse and tailored pants. "Yeah, you don't really look dressed for a surprise storm." There was no judgment in his voice, just observation. "You from around here?" "Not this neighborhood," Elise admitted. "I was walking and lost track of where I was." The young man nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I'm Lucas," he offered, extending a hand that was calloused from work, yet had the long fingers of an artist. Elise, she replied, shaking his hand and deliberately omitting her last name. There was something refreshing about being just Elise, not Elise Montgomery, CEO and public figure. "Where are you trying to get to?" Lucas asked, applying oil to his bicycle chain with practiced movements. "Once this rain lets up, I mean." Elise hesitated. Where was she trying to go? Back to her office? Her empty penthouse? Neither option held any appeal. "I suppose I should get back downtown," she said finally. Lucas glanced out the window at the unrelenting rain, then back at Elise. "That's a long walk in this weather, even when it calms down." He seemed to consider something, then offered, "I could give you a ride on my bike. It's not fancy, but it'll get you there faster than walking." Elise blinked, momentarily speechless. When was the last time anyone had offered her help without expecting something in return? "On your bicycle? With me?" Lucas grinned, and Elise was struck by how the simple expression transformed his entire face. "Yeah, I've got pegs on the back wheel. My friend Miguel here uses them all the time when his car breaks down, which is basically always." The clerk laughed, not denying it. "Lucas is the local hero around here, always helping someone out." "I couldn't possibly," Elise began, though she wasn't entirely sure why she was refusing. Was it pride? Fear of looking undignified? Or simply the unfamiliarity of accepting help? "It's really no trouble," Lucas insisted. "I'm heading that direction anyway for my last delivery of the day." Something in his earnest expression made it impossible for Elise to refuse a second time. "If you're sure it's not an imposition." "Not at all," Lucas replied, checking the window. "Look, the rain's already letting up a bit. We can head out in a few minutes." As they waited for the downpour to subside to a drizzle, Elise found herself studying Lucas with growing curiosity. There was something refreshingly genuine about him, a quality she rarely encountered in her world of corporate politics and strategic networking. He chatted easily with the clerk about school, his mother's new job, and a stray dog he'd been feeding in the alley behind his apartment building. His life seemed simultaneously simpler and more authentic than anything in Elise's carefully curated existence. When the rain had reduced to a light mist, Lucas wheeled his bike out from the back room where the clerk had let him store it. "Your chariot awaits," he joked, though Elise could see a flash of self-consciousness as he gestured to the battered bicycle. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it more than she expected to. Lucas showed her how to stand on the metal pegs attached to the rear wheel axle and hold onto his shoulders. "Just lean with me when we turn, okay? And let me know if you need to stop." The first few moments were terrifying, balancing on the small metal pegs while holding Lucas's shoulders, the ground moving beneath her feet. Elise couldn't remember the last time she'd done anything so physically precarious, but as Lucas pedaled steadily through the damp streets, something unexpected happened. The fear gave way to exhilaration. Wind rushed past her face, carrying the scents of rain-washed pavement and someone's dinner cooking. Droplets of water occasionally splashed up from puddles, spotting her expensive pants with tiny dark dots. And yet, Elise found herself smiling, then laughing outright as they sped down a slight incline. "You okay back there?" Lucas called over his shoulder, his voice carried back to her on the wind. "Yes," Elise called back, surprised to find it wasn't a lie. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt fully present in her body, in the moment, rather than mentally reviewing spreadsheets or preparing for her next meeting. As they approached downtown, the surroundings became increasingly familiar. Elise directed Lucas toward her building, reluctant for the journey to end. When they finally stopped outside the gleaming tower of Montgomery Innovations, she stepped off the pegs with a strange mixture of regret and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, reaching for her purse to offer him payment. Lucas immediately shook his head. "No need for that. I was heading this way anyway." "But you've gone out of your way to help me," Elise insisted, unused to leaving debts unpaid. "It's not a transaction," Lucas said with a small smile. "Just one person helping another, Pay it forward sometime." Before Elise could respond, Lucas's phone chimed. He checked it quickly. "Sorry, I've got to run. Last delivery of the day, and then I've got a ton of homework." He gave her a quick wave. "Take care, Elise. Maybe I'll see you around." As he pedaled away, Elise stood watching until he disappeared around a corner. Something about the encounter had shaken her in ways she couldn't yet articulate. The casual kindness, the lack of agenda, the simple joy of the ride, all of it felt like a glimpse into a world she had forgotten existed. Inside the lobby, the security guard nodded respectfully, though his eyes widened slightly at her disheveled appearance. The elevator carried her back to the executive floor, where her assistant was waiting with barely concealed panic. "Ms. Montgomery, we've been trying to reach you for hours. The board is concerned and there are 17 messages from—" "It's fine, Julia," Elise interrupted, her voice calmer than it had been in months. "Everything is fine." Later that night, as Elise sat in her penthouse with the city lights spread before her like a carpet of stars, she found herself unable to focus on the quarterly reports she should have been reviewing. Instead, her mind kept returning to the unexpected kindness of a stranger, the feeling of the wind on her face, and the realization that somewhere along her climb to success, she had forgotten how to truly live. She didn't know the last name of the young man who had helped her. She didn't know how to find him again in a city of millions. But she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she needed to try. Lucas arrived home just after 8, his muscles aching from the extra cycling he'd done that day. The small 2-bedroom apartment he shared with his mother was quiet, which meant she was still at her second job cleaning offices downtown. A note on the refrigerator confirmed it. "Working late, leftover pasta in fridge. Don't wait up. Love you." He reheated the pasta and settled at the kitchen table with his homework, but found his thoughts drifting to the woman he'd helped earlier. There had been something striking about Elise, not just her obvious beauty, but the way she'd seemed simultaneously powerful and lost. Her clothes and manner had screamed wealth and status, yet there had been a vulnerability in her eyes that had resonated with him. Lucas shook his head, forcing himself to focus on his English assignment. The woman was probably already forgetting their brief encounter, returning to whatever privileged life she led. People like her and people like him existed in parallel universes that rarely intersected. Still, he couldn't help but smile, remembering her laughter as they'd sped down the hill toward downtown. It had sounded rusty, as if laughter wasn't something she indulged in often, but genuine in a way that had warmed something inside him. Across town, Elise sat in her home office, staring at the untouched financial reports on her desk. The penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of the climate control system and the occasional distant horn from the streets far below. The silence, once a comfort after long days of meetings and conversations, now felt oppressive. She reached for her phone, scrolling through dozens of work emails without really seeing them. What was Lucas doing now? The question arose unbidden, surprising her with its persistence. Was he at home with family, studying, out with friends? She realized how little she knew about the young man who had shown her such casual kindness. On impulse, Elise opened her laptop and typed "Speedy Deliveries" into the search bar, recalling the logo she'd glimpsed on his backpack. The company's website appeared, a local courier service that promised same-day delivery across the metropolitan area. Without analyzing her actions too closely, she clicked on the Contact Us tab and dialed the number. "Speedy Deliveries, this is Diane. How can I help you?" Elise hesitated, suddenly uncertain what exactly she was doing. "I received a delivery today and wanted to commend one of your couriers, a young man named Lucas." "Lucas Matthews? He's one of our best, always gets positive feedback from clients." Matthews. Lucas Matthews. Elise filed away the surname, feeling oddly like she'd acquired something precious. "Would it be possible to request him specifically for a delivery tomorrow?" she asked, the plan forming as she spoke. "Certainly if it's in his assigned zone. We can note the preference in the system." 10 minutes later, Elise had arranged for an urgent document to be picked up from her office and delivered across town. It was completely unnecessary. The document was a draft of a speech she'd given months ago, but it gave her a reason to potentially see Lucas again. Only after hanging up did Elise question what she was doing. This wasn't like her at all. She didn't chase after people, especially not teenagers she'd met by chance. Yet something about Lucas's genuine kindness and the brief freedom she'd felt on the back of his bicycle had awakened a longing she couldn't quite name. The next morning found Lucas at the Speedy Deliveries dispatch office, checking the day's assignments on his phone. His route was typical except for a high-priority pickup at Montgomery Innovations scheduled for 11 a.m. The name of the building triggered a memory. That was where he'd taken Elise yesterday. Was it just coincidence? Or had she somehow requested him? The thought was ridiculous. Why would a woman like her remember him, let alone ask for him specifically? Yet he couldn't shake the strange feeling as he pedaled toward his first deliveries of the day. By 10:55, Lucas was locking his bike outside the Montgomery Innovations building, his heart beating a little faster than usual. He told himself it was from the exertion of cycling uphill, not from the possibility of seeing Elise again. The security guard recognized him this time. "Back again? You must be popular with the executives." Lucas shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just doing my job." The elevator ride to the top floor seemed even longer than before. When the doors opened, the same assistant from yesterday was waiting, but this time she led him not to the reception desk, but toward a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. "Ms. Montgomery asked to see you personally," she explained, knocking briefly before opening the door. The spacious office beyond was dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and a sleek desk where Elise sat reviewing documents. Lucas froze in the doorway, understanding dawning as he finally connected the dots. Elise Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Innovations, one of the youngest women ever to head a Fortune 500 company. The person he'd given a bicycle ride to was not just any businesswoman, but one of the most powerful people in the city. She looked up and smiled, and Lucas was struck by how different she appeared from yesterday. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes immaculate, her entire demeanor exuding confidence and authority. Yet when their eyes met, he glimpsed the same person who had laughed with abandon on the back of his bicycle. "Lucas," she said, rising from her desk, "thank you for coming." "I didn't realize," he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "Who I was." Elise finished for him, her smile turning slightly rueful. "I know. That was rather the point yesterday. It's not often I get to be just Elise." Lucas shifted his weight, suddenly aware of his worn jeans and faded t-shirt in this pristine environment. "You arranged for this delivery, didn't you? There's no actual urgent document." "There is a document," Elise replied, picking up an envelope from her desk. "It's just not particularly urgent. I wanted to thank you properly for your help yesterday." "Like I said, it wasn't a big deal," Lucas said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Elise said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people wouldn't have noticed someone in need, let alone gone out of their way to help." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Would you sit for a moment? I'd like to talk to you." Lucas hesitated. His next pickup wasn't for another 45 minutes, but this situation felt increasingly surreal. Still, curiosity won out, and he found himself sitting across from one of the most influential women in the business world. "I did some research on you," Elise said, then quickly added when she saw his expression. "Not in a stalker way, I promise. Just what was publicly available. You're in your final year of high school, you work to help support your mother, and according to your supervisor at Speedy Deliveries, you're one of their most reliable couriers." "That's kind of creepy," Lucas replied honestly, though he wasn't as disturbed as he perhaps should have been. Elise laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her polished appearance. "I suppose it is. I'm used to gathering information before meetings. Occupational hazard." But my point is, you impressed me, Lucas. Not just with your kindness, but with your character. Lucas shifted uncomfortably under her praise. I still don't understand why I'm here. Elise leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. I have a proposition for you. Montgomery Innovations has an internship program for promising students. It's competitive, but it provides valuable experience, college credit, and a stipend that's considerably more than what you'd make as a courier. The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and almost incomprehensible to Lucas. You want me to intern at your company? Because I gave you a ride on my bike? Because you showed character, compassion, and initiative, Elise corrected. Those qualities are harder to find than you might think, especially in combination. The technical skills of business can be taught, but the kind of integrity you demonstrated yesterday cannot. Lucas stared at her, trying to process what was happening. Ms. Montgomery. Elise, please. At least when we're speaking privately. Elise, he amended, the name feeling strange on his tongue. I appreciate the offer, but I don't know anything about sustainable energy or corporate business. I'm just a kid from the East Side who's decent at math and science. That's exactly who we need, Elise replied. Fresh perspectives from people with different life experiences. Too many of our interns come from privileged backgrounds with identical educations. They think the same way, see the same problems, propose the same solutions. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. I don't know. You don't have to decide now, Elise said, passing him a folder. Here's information about the program. Think about it. Talk to your mother. There's also my direct number if you have questions. Lucas took the folder automatically, still struggling to believe this conversation was real. I should probably get going. I have other deliveries. Of course, Elise said, standing. Just one more thing. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Lucas eyed it suspiciously. I told you, I don't want payment for yesterday. It's not payment, Elise assured him. Consider it an investment. Reluctantly, Lucas took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a gift certificate to an art supply store. His head snapped up in surprise. How did you know I draw? Elise smiled. Your backpack yesterday. I noticed the sketchbook peeking out. And your hands. They're the hands of someone who creates things. She shrugged at his startled expression. I observe people. It's part of my job. Lucas stared at the gift certificate, torn between gratitude and discomfort. This is too much. It's not enough, Elise countered softly. You reminded me of something important yesterday, something I'd forgotten in the corporate climb. The simple joy of human connection without agenda or expectation. That's worth more than you know. Lucas carefully tucked the gift certificate and the folder into his backpack, still processing everything that had happened. Thank you. I'll think about the internship. That's all I ask, Elise replied, extending her hand. As they shook, the connection felt different from yesterday. Charged with new awareness yet still grounded in the genuine moment they'd shared. As Lucas rode the elevator down, his mind raced with possibilities he'd never considered before. An internship at Montgomery Innovations could open doors he'd assumed were permanently closed to someone like him. The stipend might ease the financial burden on his mother, maybe even allow her to quit her second job. And the experience would look impressive on college applications. Yet doubt crept in alongside the excitement. Was Elise Montgomery genuinely interested in his potential, or was this some sort of charitable impulse born from their unusual meeting? And even if the opportunity was genuine, could someone like him, a kid from a struggling neighborhood with no connections or advantages, really succeed in the corporate world she inhabited? By the time he reached his bike, Lucas had more questions than answers. He carefully stored the folder in his backpack and continued with his deliveries, the weight of possibility both thrilling and terrifying. Back in her office, Elise found herself unable to focus on work for the second day in a row. The meeting with Lucas had left her feeling strangely energized, yet unsettled. She'd acted on impulse again, something she rarely did in business. The internship offer had not been planned. It had simply felt right in the moment. Julia knocked and entered with a stack of papers requiring signatures. "How was your meeting with the delivery boy?" she asked, her curiosity poorly disguised as casual interest. "Courier," Elise corrected automatically, "and it was enlightening." "Will he be joining the internship program?" "That's his decision to make," Elise replied, signing the documents without really reading them. "But I hope so." After Julia left, Elise walked to the window, gazing down at the city spread before her. From 30 stories up, the people below looked like moving dots, their individual stories and struggles invisible at this distance. She'd been viewing the world from this removed perspective for too long, she realized, seeing patterns and possibilities but missing the human element. Lucas had momentarily brought her back to earth, reminded her of the impact one person could have on another through simple kindness. If he accepted the internship, would that quality remain intact, or would the corporate environment gradually reshape him into something more conventional, more professional? The thought troubled her. She didn't want to change Lucas. His authenticity was precisely what had drawn her to him. Yet she knew from experience how environments could transform people, often in ways they didn't recognize until it was too late. Elise's phone chimed with a reminder for her next meeting. With reluctance, she turned from the window and gathered her materials, pushing thoughts of Lucas to the back of her mind. She had a company to run, expectations to meet, a carefully constructed image to maintain. Whatever connection she felt to the young courier would have to wait. Yet, as she moved through the rest of her day, the budget meeting, the conference call with investors, the planning session for the next product launch, Elise found herself wondering what Lucas was doing, whether he was considering her offer, and why the brief time in his presence had felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. That evening, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his mother, the internship folder open between them. Maria Matthews looked exhausted, the lines around her eyes deeper after a 12-hour day cleaning offices followed by a shift at the local diner. But her eyes were alert and focused as she reviewed the documents. "Montgomery Innovations," she murmured, running her finger along the company letterhead. "How did this happen, mijo?" Lucas recounted his encounters with Elise, watching his mother's expression shift from disbelief to cautious hope. "So this CEO, she offered you an internship because you gave her a ride on your bicycle?" Maria's tone was skeptical. People like that don't just hand out opportunities without wanting something in return. "I don't think it's like that," Lucas defended, though his mother's concerns echoed his own doubts. "She seemed genuine, like she really saw something in me." Maria reached across the table to take her son's hand. "You have always been special, Lucas. I'm not surprised she saw it too. I just worry." She trailed off, her eyes dropping to the stipend amount listed in the paperwork. It was substantially more than what Lucas earned at Speedy Deliveries. "This would help us a lot," she admitted quietly, "but only if it's legitimate, and only if it doesn't interfere with your schoolwork." "It says the hours are flexible," Lucas pointed out, "and it counts for school credit. Ms. Ramirez always says internships look great on college applications." Maria studied her son's face, seeing the mixture of excitement and uncertainty there. "You want to do this, don't you?" Lucas nodded slowly. "I think so. It's a different world, you know? These people in their glass towers making deals worth millions. What do I know about any of that?" "You know about hard work," Maria said firmly. "You know about integrity. You know what it means to earn every dollar that comes into this house." Her expression softened. "Your father would be proud of the man you're becoming." The mention of his father, who had died of cancer when Lucas was just 8, brought a familiar ache to his chest. What would David Matthews have thought of this opportunity? His father had been a construction worker, building the very skyscrapers that housed companies like Montgomery Innovations, always saying that someday his son would work inside one of those towers instead of building them. "I think I want to try," Lucas finally said. "Even if it doesn't work out, at least I'll have tried." Maria squeezed his hand. "Then try, mijo. But promise me something. Don't forget who you are. That world." She gestured vaguely toward the downtown skyline visible through their small kitchen window. "It can change people, not always for the better." "I won't forget," Lucas promised, though he wasn't entirely sure what his mother meant. How could an opportunity like this change who he was? After dinner, Lucas retreated to the small bedroom he'd had since childhood. The walls were covered with his drawings, cityscapes mostly, the skyline of their neighborhood gradually transitioning to the gleaming towers of downtown. He'd always been fascinated by that contrast, the way prosperity and struggle existed so close together, yet remained worlds apart. He pulled out his sketchbook and the gift certificate Elise had given him, $500 to Hartman's Art Supply, a store he'd walked past countless times but never entered, knowing the prices were far beyond his means. With this, he could buy professional quality supplies instead of the discount store materials he usually used. As he traced his fingers over the certificate, Lucas's mind returned to Elise. What had she seen in him that made her extend such an extraordinary offer? And why did he feel this strange connection to her, a woman so far removed from his daily reality? Turning to a blank page in his sketchbook, Lucas began to draw from memory. Elise's face emerged under his pencil, not the polished businesswoman from the office that morning, but the rain-soaked woman who had laughed with delight as they sped through the streets on his bicycle. There had been something genuine in that moment, something that transcended the barriers of age, wealth, and social position. When he finished the sketch, Lucas stared at it for a long moment before making his decision. He reached for his phone and dialed the number Elise had given him. Across town, Elise was reviewing acquisition proposals when her personal phone rang. She rarely received calls on this line. Few people had the number. Seeing Lucas's name on the screen sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Lucas," she answered, setting aside the documents. "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you so soon." "I've been thinking about your offer," he said, his voice sounding younger over the phone. "I talked it over with my mom, and I'd like to accept, if the offer still stands." "It absolutely does," Elise replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "That's wonderful news. When would you like to start?" "Whenever works for you. I'll need to give Speedy Deliveries some notice, but they're pretty flexible with student workers." "How about next Monday?" Elise suggested. "That would give you time to arrange things with your current job and for us to prepare for your arrival." "Monday works," Lucas agreed, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me, really? There must be hundreds of kids with better qualifications, better backgrounds, just better everything." Elise considered her answer carefully. "Do you know what I see most days, Lucas? People who want something from me. My time, my influence, my company's resources. Everyone has an agenda, a carefully calculated approach. But you—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You helped me simply because I needed help. No ulterior motive, no expectation of return. That kind of authentic humanity is rare, especially in my world, and I think it's exactly what Montgomery Innovations needs more of." There was silence on the line for a moment. "I don't know if I can live up to that," Lucas finally said. "You already have," Elise assured him. "Just be yourself. That's all I'm asking." After they hung up, Elise remained at her desk, staring out at the city lights. Had she made the right decision? The board would question her bypassing the normal internship application process. HR would raise concerns about potential impropriety. But for once, Elise didn't care about the corporate protocols or potential gossip. Something about this felt right in a way that transcended conventional business logic. Her phone chimed with a text from her younger sister Charlotte. "Dinner tomorrow? Need to talk about Mom's birthday." Elise sighed, her momentary contentment evaporating. Their mother's 70th birthday was approaching, and Charlotte had been planning an elaborate celebration at their family's country estate. It would be filled with society friends, business associates, and the usual parade of people more interested in the Montgomery name than in the woman herself. "Can we do lunch instead?" Elise texted back. "Packed schedule these days." Charlotte's response was immediate. "Always working. Fine, 1 p.m. at Maison. Don't be late this time." Elise set down her phone with a twinge of guilt. Charlotte had always been better at maintaining family connections, at fulfilling the social obligations that came with their status. Elise had been focused on proving herself in business since their father's death 10 years ago, determined to show that a daughter could run his company as effectively as the son he'd never had. The thought of Lucas's mother arose unexpectedly. What would Maria Matthews think of her son entering Elise's world? Would she worry about him the way Elise's own mother had worried when Elise first joined the corporate ranks? The parallels made Elise uncomfortable, reminding her of the person she'd been before power and responsibility had reshaped her. The following Monday arrived with a nervous energy that Lucas hadn't felt since his first day of high school. He stood before the mirror in his bedroom, examining his reflection critically. He'd spent his last paycheck from Speedy Deliveries on a pair of dress pants and a button-down shirt, wanting to look professional for his first day. They weren't designer clothes, but they were the best he could afford. "You look handsome," his mother said from the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Like your father when he wore his Sunday best." Lucas tugged at his collar, unused to the constriction. "Is it too much? I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard." "You look like a young man ready for an important opportunity," Maria assured him, stepping forward to smooth his collar. "Remember what I said. Be respectful, be attentive, but don't let anyone make you feel less than what you are." The subway ride downtown was filled with commuters in similar attire, though most wore expressions of resigned routine rather than Lucas's barely contained mix of excitement and terror. As he emerged at the station nearest Montgomery Innovations, he had to force himself to walk normally rather than turn back toward the familiar comfort of his neighborhood. The security guard at the front desk checked his ID against a list, then handed him a temporary badge. "Ms. Montgomery's assistant will meet you on the 30th floor." In the elevator, Lucas practiced steady breathing, trying to calm his racing heart. This was just an internship, he reminded himself. A learning opportunity, not a life sentence. If it didn't work out, he could always go back to delivering packages. But as the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, Lucas knew he was crossing a threshold that would forever divide his life into before and after. Whatever happened in the coming weeks would change him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Julia was waiting, her professional smile revealing nothing of what she thought about this unusual addition to the company. "Welcome to Montgomery Innovations, Mr. Matthews. Let's get you settled." The morning passed in a blur of paperwork, introductions, and orientation. Lucas was assigned to the Community Outreach Division, which focused on implementing Montgomery's sustainable energy solutions in underserved neighborhoods. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd grown up in exactly the kind of community they were targeting. By lunchtime, his head was swimming with new information, names, and protocols. He sat alone in the company cafeteria, picking at a salad that cost more than he usually spent on lunch for an entire week when a shadow fell across his table. "Mind if I join you?" Elise asked, setting down her tray without waiting for an answer. Heads turned throughout the cafeteria as employees noted their CEO sitting with the new intern. Lucas felt his cheeks warm under the scrutiny. "Everyone's staring," he murmured, focusing intently on his salad. "Let them," Elise replied calmly, taking a seat. "How's your first day going?" "It's overwhelming," Lucas admitted. "I've learned more acronyms today than in all my years of school combined." Elise laughed, the sound drawing even more attention from nearby tables. "The corporate world does love its abbreviations, but you'll catch on quickly. How do you like the community outreach team? They seem nice. Director Rivera was really welcoming. Lucas hesitated, then added, Is this normal? The CEO having lunch with an intern, I mean. No, Elise answered honestly. But I'm trying to be more directly involved with different departments. Starting with community outreach seemed fitting. It was a plausible explanation, but Lucas sensed there was more to it. The way Elise had sought him out, the personal interest she was taking in his adjustment, it went beyond professional courtesy. I should probably tell you, he said quietly. People are going to talk. About why I'm here, I mean. People always talk, Elise replied, seemingly unconcerned. Especially when they don't understand something. But I didn't hire you for them. I hired you because I believe you have something valuable to contribute. Lucas nodded, wanting to believe her but still uncertain. The gap between their worlds felt even wider here in the corporate setting than it had on the rain-soaked street where they'd met. I should get back, Elise said, checking her watch. I have a conference call at 1. But Lucas... She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. If you ever feel overwhelmed or out of place, my door is open. This transition isn't easy for anyone, let alone someone coming from... She paused, clearly searching for a delicate phrasing. From the wrong side of town? Lucas supplied with a wry smile. From a different background, Elise amended firmly. But that difference is precisely what makes your perspective valuable here. As she stood to leave, employees throughout the cafeteria suddenly became very interested in their meals, pretending they hadn't been watching the exchange with intense curiosity. Thank you, Lucas said, meaning it despite his lingering doubts. For the opportunity. For believing I can do this. I won't let you down. Elise's expression softened momentarily, revealing something vulnerable beneath her professional exterior. I know you won't. That's the one thing I'm certain of. As she walked away, Lucas felt the weight of expectation settle more firmly on his shoulders. Whatever her reasons for bringing him into this world, he was determined to prove her faith in him was justified, not just for her sake, but for his own. 2 weeks into his internship, Lucas found himself sitting in a conference room with the entire community outreach team, listening to a presentation about Montgomery Innovation's latest initiative. The Solar Neighborhoods project aimed to install subsidized solar panels in low-income areas, reducing electricity costs for residents while showcasing the company's newest technology. Director Rivera, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had risen through the ranks from an entry-level position, was outlining the target communities. We've identified 3 neighborhoods for the pilot program based on infrastructure compatibility and need assessment. A map appeared on the screen, highlighting 3 areas. Lucas recognized one immediately, Eastwood, just 2 blocks from his own apartment complex. We'll begin community outreach next month, Rivera continued. The challenge, as always, will be gaining residents' trust. Many have had negative experiences with corporate initiatives that promised benefits but ultimately served corporate interests more than community needs. Lucas shifted in his seat, feeling a familiar discomfort. He'd seen it happen in his own neighborhood, companies arriving with grand promises, garnering positive press for their community investment, then disappearing when the projects proved more complicated or less profitable than anticipated. Any questions before we break into working groups? Rivera asked, scanning the room. Lucas hesitated, then raised his hand. Rivera nodded encouragingly. Matthews, right? Our newest team member. Yes, ma'am, Lucas said, unused to speaking in such settings. I actually live near one of these neighborhoods, and I'm wondering if the team has considered the practical barriers to implementation. What kind of barriers? Rivera asked, her interest clearly piqued. Well, for instance, in Eastwood, a lot of residents are renters, not homeowners. They can't authorize installations, and landlords often don't want to invest in improvements when they're not paying the utility bills. Lucas paused, gathering courage as the room's attention focused on him. And many residents work multiple jobs with irregular hours. Traditional outreach events during business hours won't reach them. Rivera's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine engagement. Those are excellent points, Matthews. How would you suggest we address these issues? Put on the spot, Lucas took a deep breath. Maybe partner with local community centers for evening events? And develop incentives specifically for landlords, showing how property values increase with energy upgrades? A murmur of discussion spread through the room. Rivera nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to hear more about this. Matthews, would you be willing to join the strategy team for Eastwood? Your local knowledge would be invaluable. Of course, Lucas agreed, both pleased and surprised to be asked. As the meeting broke up, several colleagues stopped to introduce themselves, suddenly seeing the new intern in a different light. Lucas felt a cautious pride. He'd contributed something meaningful based not on his educational background or corporate experience, but on his lived reality. Exactly what Elise had said made his perspective valuable. Later that afternoon, as Lucas was compiling research on community energy programs, Julia appeared at his cubicle. Ms. Montgomery would like to see you in her office. Lucas followed her through the maze of workstations, aware of curious glances following his progress. The CEO requesting an intern's presence was unusual enough to fuel the office gossip mill for days. Elise was on a phone call when he entered but gestured for him to take a seat. That timeline works for me, Akira. Have the team send me the revised projections by Friday. She hung up and turned her full attention to Lucas. I heard you made quite an impression in the outreach meeting. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. News travels fast. Rivera sent me a note specifically mentioning your contributions. She said you brought critical insights from lived experience. Elise smiled. That's exactly why I wanted you here. It wasn't anything special, Lucas demurred. Just observations from my neighborhood. Observations that our highly educated, well-paid team missed entirely, Elise pointed out. Don't undervalue your contribution, Lucas. The use of his first name, casual and familiar, reminded him of their unusual connection. In the corporate environment, with Elise in her tailored suit behind an imposing desk, it was easy to forget the woman who had laughed on the back of his bicycle. How are you settling in? She asked, her tone softening. Honestly. Lucas considered the question. It's an adjustment. Everything here is so different from what I'm used to. The way people talk, the unwritten rules, even the food in the cafeteria. He smiled ruefully. I had to Google what charcuterie was when someone mentioned it at lunch yesterday. Elise laughed. I still remember my first corporate function. I used the wrong fork for the salad and thought my mother would die of embarrassment. The image of a younger, uncertain Elise struggling with place settings humanized her in a way Lucas hadn't expected. You grew up in this world, though. On the periphery, Elise clarified. My father built Montgomery Innovations from nothing. We had money by the time I was a teenager, but he never let us forget our middle-class roots. A shadow crossed her face, though I think even he would be surprised by how much has changed since then. Before Lucas could respond, Julia's voice came through the intercom. Your 3 o'clock is here, Ms. Montgomery. Thank you, Julia. Let them know I'll be right with them. Elise stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Keep up the good work, Lucas. And remember, my door is always open to you. As Lucas left the executive suite, he noticed a group of well-dressed men waiting in the reception area, their expressions registering surprise as a teenager in off-the-rack clothing emerged from the CEO's office. He nodded politely and continued to the elevator, their whispered comments following him like shadows. The incident in the meeting and his conversation with Elise had boosted Lucas's confidence, but the stares and whispers were a constant reminder of his outsider status. He didn't belong here, not really, and everyone knew it, including him. Yet there was a part of him that was beginning to think maybe he could belong, with time. The internship was teaching him more than just corporate protocols and sustainable energy solutions. It was showing him a world of possibilities he'd never considered accessible. That evening, Lucas found himself studying the corporate jargon and cultural references he encountered each day, determined not to be caught off guard again. His mother watched with a mixture of pride and concern as he practiced speaking more formally, adopting the subtle mannerisms of his colleagues. "You're changing," she observed one night as they washed dishes together. "Is that bad?" Lucas asked, genuinely uncertain. Maria considered the question. "Change isn't bad, mijo. Growth is necessary. I just hope you're changing because you want to, not because you think you need to become someone else to succeed there." The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Was he changing to fit in? Or was he simply expanding who he was to encompass new possibilities? Across town, Elise was facing her own version of this question at dinner with her sister Charlotte at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city. "So this intern," Charlotte said, cutting her steak with precision, "the one everyone's talking about, is it true you bypassed the entire selection process to hire him?" Elise sighed, wishing her sister wasn't quite so plugged into the corporate gossip network. "Lucas Matthews is exceptionally talented. Sometimes the standard processes miss the most promising candidates." Charlotte raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "And the fact that he's young, attractive, and apparently has you smiling more than anyone's seen in years is just coincidence?" "It's not like that," Elise replied sharply, though the suggestion made her uncomfortably aware of the warmth she felt in Lucas's presence. "He's 17, Charlotte. He's an intern who brings a valuable perspective to our community projects." "If you say so." Charlotte's tone made it clear she wasn't convinced. "Just be careful, Elise. People are starting to talk, and not just within the company. Bradford mentioned it at the club last weekend." Bradford Hamilton III was Charlotte's fiancé, a man Elise found insufferably pompous but tolerated for her sister's sake. The idea that Lucas had become a topic of conversation in the rarefied air of the West Hill Country Club was disturbing. "There's nothing inappropriate about mentoring a promising young person," Elise said firmly. "Of course not," Charlotte agreed too quickly. "It's just unusual for that mentoring to come directly from the CEO rather than, say, a department head." She reached for her wine glass. "And then there's the background issue." "What background issue?" Elise's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "You know what I mean, Elise. He's from the East Side. His mother cleans offices for a living. It's all very Pygmalion." Elise set down her fork with deliberate care. "Lucas Matthews has more genuine intelligence and integrity than half the Ivy League graduates we hire. His background isn't a liability. It's precisely what makes his perspective so valuable to the company." Charlotte studied her sister with newfound interest. "My God, you really do care about him." "As a mentor," Elise insisted, though even she could hear the defensive note in her voice. "He reminds me of who I used to be before." She gestured vaguely at their surroundings, the exclusive restaurant where a single meal cost more than many families spent on groceries in a week. "Before you became one of the most powerful women in the business world?" Charlotte supplied. "That's not something to regret, Elise." "I don't regret my success," Elise clarified, "but sometimes I wonder what I've lost along the way." Charlotte's expression softened. "If this boy helps you remember something important, then I'm glad he's in your life. Just be careful about appearances. The board won't appreciate rumors that their CEO is emotionally involved with a teenage intern, even if it's completely innocent." The warning stayed with Elise long after dinner ended. On her drive home, she found herself questioning her own motivations. Was her interest in Lucas truly professional? Or was Charlotte right? Was there something more personal driving her actions? The next day, determined to maintain appropriate boundaries, Elise deliberately avoided the floor where Lucas worked. She buried herself in financial projections and supplier negotiations, telling herself she was simply being responsible. But when Julia mentioned that Lucas had made another significant contribution to the outreach team, suggesting they recruit local students as paid ambassadors for the solar program, Elise couldn't help the surge of pride that rose in her chest. Director Rivera says his ideas are revolutionizing their approach, Julia reported. The team is actually excited about the Eastwood project now. They think it could become a model for future initiatives. Elise nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. That's excellent. Please tell Rivera I look forward to seeing the revised proposal. After Julia left, Elise stood at her window, gazing down at the city below. Somewhere out there was the street where she'd met Lucas, where a simple act of kindness had catalyzed a connection that was becoming increasingly complex. She couldn't deny that Lucas stirred something in her, not romantic attraction despite Charlotte's insinuations, but a kind of recognition, a reminder of passion and purpose beyond profit margins and market share. The question was whether she could nurture that connection without compromising her professional responsibilities or, worse, damaging Lucas's promising future with workplace gossip and speculation. The answer came unexpectedly the following day when a corporate crisis forced them to work together directly for the first time. A local news outlet had published a scathing article about the Solar Neighborhoods project, claiming it was merely a tax write-off with minimal community benefit. The piece quoted several Eastwood residents expressing skepticism about Montgomery's motives. "We need to respond immediately," Elise told her crisis management team, gathered in the conference room. "This could derail the entire project before it begins." "Standard press release?" suggested the communications director, "emphasizing our commitment to sustainability and community development?" Elise shook her head. "Too corporate. It won't address the fundamental issue of trust." She turned to Rivera. "Is Matthews here today?" "He should be at his desk," Rivera confirmed. "Want me to call him up?" 10 minutes later, Lucas entered the conference room, looking nervous but composed as Elise explained the situation. "These are your neighbors, Lucas. They don't trust us, and frankly, I don't blame them. How do we change that?" Lucas studied the article carefully before responding. "A press release won't help. Neither will statements from executives in suits." He looked up, meeting Elise's gaze directly. "You need to show, not tell, and you need to listen before you show." "What do you suggest?" Elise asked, aware of the entire team watching their exchange with interest. "A community forum. Not at some downtown hotel, but right in Eastwood, at the community center. No PowerPoints, no corporate jargon, just honest conversation about what residents actually need and how Montgomery can help provide it." The communications director frowned. "That's high risk. Uncontrolled environment, potential for confrontation. Also high reward," Lucas countered with surprising confidence. "If you really listen and adjust the program based on community input, you'll build the trust you need for this project to succeed." Elise found herself smiling despite the seriousness of the situation. This was exactly why she'd brought Lucas into the company, for this unfiltered perspective, this willingness to challenge conventional corporate thinking. "Let's do it," she decided. "Rivera, work with Matthews to organize the forum. I want the entire executive team there, including me." As the meeting dispersed, Elise caught Lucas's arm. "That took courage," she said quietly. "Challenging a room full of executives isn't easy." Lucas shrugged, though she could see he was pleased by her approval. "It's easier when you know someone has your back." The simple statement affected Elise more than she wanted to admit. When was the last time anyone had seen her as an ally rather than a boss or competitor? When had anyone trusted her simply as a person rather than as CEO of Montgomery Innovations? "I do have your back," she confirmed softly, "and I think you might have mine as well." The Eastwood Community Center hummed with tension as residents filed in, filling the folding chairs arranged in a large circle. Lucas stood near the entrance, greeting neighbors and introducing them to members of the Montgomery team. He'd spent the past week helping prepare for this forum, making sure every detail communicated respect rather than corporate condescension. Gone were the sleek PowerPoint presentations and glossy brochures typical of Montgomery events. Instead, large sheets of blank paper hung on the walls, ready to capture community concerns and suggestions. Refreshments came from local businesses rather than the upscale catering company Montgomery typically used. Even the seating arrangement, a circle rather than rows facing a stage, had been Lucas's suggestion to minimize the sense of hierarchy. "Is Ms. Montgomery really coming?" asked Mrs. Diaz, who ran the bodega where Lucas had bought candy since childhood. Her skepticism was evident. "She'll be here," Lucas assured her, checking his watch. Elise had promised to attend, despite her packed schedule and the board's concerns about her personal involvement in what they considered a minor PR issue. Right on cue, the community center doors opened, and Elise entered. Lucas felt a surge of relief, followed by unexpected pride as he noticed her attire. Gone was the power suit and imposing heels. Instead, Elise wore dark jeans, a simple blouse, and minimal jewelry, professional but approachable. She'd understood the importance of presentation without him having to explain. "That's her?" Mrs. Diaz whispered, clearly surprised by the CEO's understated appearance. Lucas nodded, watching as Elise scanned the room, her eyes finding his with a quick smile of acknowledgement before she continued greeting community members. She moved with confidence but not arrogance, shaking hands and introducing herself simply as Elise Montgomery from Montgomery Innovations, rather than emphasizing her title. Director Rivera approached Lucas as the room filled to capacity. "This turnout is impressive. How did you manage it?" "Word of mouth," Lucas replied, "and I asked the pastor at New Hope to announce it after Sunday service." Rivera nodded appreciatively. "Smart. We should incorporate faith communities into our outreach strategy more consistently." She glanced toward Elise, who was engaged in conversation with an elderly resident. "She looks different here. More human." The observation struck Lucas as both accurate and revealing of how Elise was typically perceived. In the corporate environment, her authority created a barrier that few saw past. Here, removed from the trappings of power, her natural warmth was more evident. The forum began with brief introductions, then moved quickly to community concerns. As Lucas had predicted, residents were skeptical of Montgomery's motives. "Last year, HealthRight came in talking about community wellness programs," said Mr. Wilson, a retired postal worker. "They took their tax write-off and disappeared within 6 months. Why should we believe you'll be different?" Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but Elise leaned forward in her chair, her expression open. "That's a fair question. We can make promises, but they're just words until we follow through with action. What I can tell you is that this project matters to me personally, not just as a business opportunity." "Why?" The direct question came from Tanya Rodriguez, a community organizer known for challenging corporate initiatives in the neighborhood. "Why does Eastwood matter to Montgomery Innovations?" A silence fell over the room. It was the fundamental question. Why should this wealthy corporation care about a struggling neighborhood? The answer would determine whether the community embraced or rejected the project. Elise glanced at Lucas before responding. "Because we've been reminded recently that our company doesn't exist in isolation from the communities around us. Our success means little if it doesn't extend beyond our shareholders to the people in the neighborhoods where we operate." She gestured toward Lucas. "One of our team members helped us see that more clearly." Lucas felt dozens of eyes turn toward him, neighbors surprised to find one of their own affiliated with Montgomery. Tanya's gaze was particularly sharp, assessing whether he had sold out or was genuinely advocating for the community. "Lucas suggested we come here tonight to listen, not just talk," Elise continued. "So that's what we're going to do. Tell us what Eastwood needs, what concerns you have about this project, and how we can make it truly beneficial for this community." What followed was the most honest conversation Lucas had ever witnessed in a corporate setting. Residents spoke bluntly about previous broken promises from companies, about landlords who neglected properties while raising rents, about the daily struggles of making ends meet. The Montgomery team listened, asked questions, and took notes. No corporate jargon, no defensiveness, just genuine dialogue. Lucas found himself moving between worlds, explaining corporate constraints to neighbors in terms they understood, then translating community concerns into language that resonated with the executives. It was exhausting but exhilarating, using his unique position to bridge gaps that had seemed insurmountable. As the formal discussion concluded and people broke into smaller conversations over refreshments, Tanya approached Lucas. "So you work for Montgomery now? That's a long way from delivering packages." "It's an internship," Lucas clarified, sensing her suspicion. "I'm still the same person, Tanya." She studied him, taking in his newer clothes and more confident posture. "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've crossed over." The accusation stung because it echoed his own private fears. "I haven't forgotten where I come from," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make things better from the inside." "Just be careful the inside doesn't change you more than you change it," Tanya warned, her expression softening slightly. "Corporate culture has a way of swallowing idealism." Before Lucas could respond, Elise approached them. "Ms. Rodriguez, right? Your points about landlord incentives were excellent. Would you be willing to join our advisory committee for this project? We need perspectives like yours to keep us honest." Tanya looked momentarily taken aback by the direct invitation. "I'd need to know more about what that entails." "Of course," Elise agreed. "Lucas can share the details with you. We're hoping to form a committee that genuinely represents Eastwood's interests, with real influence over how this project develops." After exchanging contact information, Tanya left to speak with other community members, leaving Lucas and Elise briefly alone. "That went better than I expected," Elise admitted, watching the mingling crowd. "Your approach was right. This is how we should have been doing community outreach all along." "People just want to be heard," Lucas said, "especially by someone with the power to actually change things." Elise turned to him, her expression unusually vulnerable. "Thank you for helping us get this right, for helping me see what I was missing." The genuine gratitude in her voice made Lucas's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. In that moment, the CEO title fell away, and he saw just Elise, intelligent, passionate, and striving to do better. The connection between them felt almost tangible. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Bradford Hamilton III, who looked jarringly out of place in his tailored suit and Italian loafers. "Elise, there you are. Charlotte mentioned you'd be at some community event, but I must say, this is the last place I expected to find Montgomery Innovations' CEO." Elise's expression cooled noticeably. "Bradford, I wasn't aware you were attending." Last-minute decision. The Hamilton Foundation is considering some investments in underprivileged areas. Tax benefits, you know. He glanced around the community center with barely disguised distaste. "Though I must say, this seems rather hands-on for someone at your level." Lucas watched the interaction with growing discomfort, recognizing the condescension in Bradford's tone and the subtle stiffening of Elise's posture in response. "Lucas, this is Bradford Hamilton, my sister's fiancé," Elise said, her voice formal. "Bradford, Lucas Matthews, the intern who organized tonight's forum." Bradford's handshake was perfunctory, his assessment dismissive. "Ah, the famous intern. Charlotte's mentioned you. Quite the Cinderella story, I gather." The comment, delivered with a thin smile, managed to diminish both Lucas's accomplishments and Elise's judgment in a single stroke. Lucas felt a familiar sensation, the subtle reminder that people like Bradford would always see him as an oddity, a charity case rather than a colleague deserving of respect. "I wouldn't say that," Lucas replied evenly. "I'm just fortunate that Ms. Montgomery's company values diverse perspectives." Bradford chuckled as if Lucas had said something naively amusing. "Yes, diversity is quite the buzzword these days, isn't it? Though typically it refers to more official categories." "Lucas's contributions are based on merit, not demographics," Elise interjected, her tone carrying a warning edge. "His insights have already improved our community outreach strategy significantly." "I'm sure they have," Bradford replied smoothly, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Well, I should mingle. Potential investments to evaluate and all that. Pleasure meeting you, Matthews." As he moved away, Lucas released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'm guessing he's not a fan of the Solar Neighborhoods project?" "Bradford isn't a fan of anything that doesn't directly benefit Bradford," Elise said, her voice low. "I apologize for his behavior." "You don't need to apologize for him," Lucas assured her, though the encounter had left a sour taste. It was a stark reminder of the barriers he faced, not just professional inexperience but deep-seated social prejudice. Elise seemed about to say more when Rivera approached with several community members who had additional questions. The moment passed, but throughout the remainder of the evening, Lucas caught Elise watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, something between concern and a deeper emotion he didn't dare name. The forum concluded with concrete next steps: a community advisory committee, a timeline for the pilot project, and a commitment to regular meetings for continued input. As residents departed, many stopped to thank Lucas personally, expressing surprise and approval at Montgomery's new approach. "You were the bridge we needed tonight," Elise told him as they helped stack chairs after most people had left. It was a strangely intimate moment, the CEO of a billion-dollar company and her intern performing a mundane task together after hours. "I was just doing my job," Lucas replied, though the praise warmed him. It was more than that. Elise paused, choosing her words carefully. "You have a gift for bringing people together across divides. It's rare and valuable, especially in a world that seems increasingly fragmented." Lucas thought about Tanya's warning and Bradford's condescension, opposing perspectives that nonetheless shared a common assumption, that he couldn't truly belong in both worlds. "Sometimes I feel like I don't quite fit anywhere anymore," he admitted. "Too corporate for Eastwood, too Eastwood for the corporate world." Elise's expression softened with understanding. That in-between place is uncomfortable, but it's also where real change happens. The people who can translate between worlds are the ones who ultimately transform them. Her words settled over him like a benediction, easing the tension he'd been carrying. As they finished cleaning up and walked out into the cool evening air, Lucas felt a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps his role wasn't to choose one world over the other, but to help build a bridge between them. "Need a ride home?" Elise asked, gesturing toward her car, a luxury vehicle that would certainly draw attention in his neighborhood. Lucas smiled, remembering their first meeting. "Thanks, but I think I'll take the bus tonight. Less likely to start rumors than the CEO's car pulling up to my apartment building." Elise returned his smile, acknowledging the wisdom in his decision. "Good night then, Lucas. And thank you again for tonight. I think we made real progress." "We did," he agreed, and the shared accomplishment felt significant, not just for the project, but for their evolving connection. The Eastwood Community Forum transformed Lucas's position at Montgomery Innovations overnight. What had been whispered speculation about the CEO's charity case became grudging respect for a young man who had single-handedly bridged the gap between corporate interests and community needs. The Solar Neighborhoods project was gaining positive media attention, with several outlets praising Montgomery's innovative approach to community engagement. In a morning meeting the week after the forum, Director Rivera presented preliminary feedback to the executive team. "Community support has increased by 68% since the forum," she reported, displaying a graph of survey results. "We've received 43 applications for the advisory committee, and local business owners are reaching out about potential partnerships." "Impressive results," commented the Chief Operating Officer Howard Chen, "and remarkably cost-effective compared to our usual marketing campaigns." Elise nodded, but her expression remained serious. "This isn't about marketing. It's about building genuine relationships with the communities we serve." She turned to Lucas, who was sitting quietly at the far end of the conference table, still unused to being included in executive meetings. "Matthews, you've been coordinating with the new advisory committee. What's your assessment? Lucas straightened, aware of the expectant gazes around the table. 6 weeks ago, he would have stammered through a response, intimidated by the collection of advanced degrees and expensive suits surrounding him. Now he spoke with quiet confidence. The committee is enthusiastic but cautious. They've been promised community input on previous projects that ultimately ignored their feedback. They're watching to see if we're different. He paused, then added, "Transparency will be crucial moving forward. If there are constraints or limitations on what we can implement, we need to be upfront about them." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "Fair point. We should establish clear parameters about what aspects of the project are flexible and which aren't." "I'd suggest the opposite approach," Lucas countered, surprising himself with his boldness. "Rather than starting with our limitations, let's hear their ideas first, without constraints. Some might be impractical, but others might inspire solutions we haven't considered." A brief silence followed his suggestion. Lucas could feel Howard assessing him, re-evaluating the intern who dared challenge a C-suite executive. "I agree with Matthews," Elise said finally. "Let's approach this as a genuine collaboration, not just a modified version of our original plan." After the meeting dispersed, Howard approached Lucas in the hallway. "That was good thinking in there," he said, his tone conveying genuine approval. "Rivera mentioned you're finishing high school this year. Have you thought about college?" "I'm applying to state," Lucas replied. "If I can get enough scholarship money." Howard raised an eyebrow. "With your demonstrated abilities, you should be aiming higher. MIT, Stanford, schools with strong sustainability programs." Lucas laughed reflexively. "Those aren't exactly realistic options for someone like me." "They are if you have the right backing," Howard countered. "Montgomery has scholarship programs, and with a recommendation from the executive team." He let the implication hang in the air. "Think about it. You have potential that shouldn't be limited by financial constraints." As Howard walked away, Lucas stood frozen in the hallway, his mind reeling. MIT or Stanford had never been part of his imagined future. Even State University had seemed like a stretch. Yet here was a top executive casually suggesting possibilities that would transform his entire life trajectory. The interaction with Howard exemplified the strange new reality Lucas was navigating. At Montgomery, doors were opening, opportunities materializing that he'd never dreamed possible. Yet in his neighborhood, his new status was creating unexpected complications. That evening, Lucas stopped by Diaz Grocery to pick up ingredients for dinner. Mrs. Diaz greeted him with unusual formality. "Mr. Montgomery executive," she teased, though there was an undercurrent of seriousness in her tone. "Too important for our little store these days?" "I've been busy," Lucas explained, feeling a twinge of guilt. He had been shopping at the supermarket closer to Montgomery lately, finding it more convenient during his long work days. "So I hear," Mrs. Diaz replied, bagging his purchases. "Everyone's talking about you and that solar project. Some say you convinced the big boss lady to actually listen to people around here." Lucas shrugged uncomfortably. Ms. Montgomery was already committed to making the project work for the community. I just helped with the details. Mrs. Diaz studied him with shrewd eyes that had watched him grow up. "You talk different now. More like them." The observation stung because it echoed his mother's comments and Tanya's warning. Was he changing so fundamentally? And if so, was it growth or betrayal? "Still me, Mrs. D," he said, trying to recapture his old manner of speaking, but it felt forced, artificial. "I didn't say it was bad," she clarified, her expression softening. "Just different. You're moving up in the world, Lucas. That's what your papa always wanted for you." The mention of his father brought a familiar ache. What would David Matthews think of his son now, straddling worlds he'd never had the opportunity to enter? "Thanks for saying that," Lucas replied quietly. "Just don't forget where you came from," Mrs. Diaz called after him as he left. "Those fancy corporate types, they'll never fully accept someone from the East Side." Remember who your real people are." Her words followed Lucas home, mixing uneasily with Howard's suggestion about elite universities. Everyone seemed to have opinions about where he belonged and who he should become. Everyone except Lucas himself, who felt increasingly caught between identities, belonging fully to neither world. At home, he found his mother preparing for her night shift at the diner. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the furniture shabbier than he remembered. Had it changed, or had his perspective shifted after weeks in Montgomery's gleaming glass offices? "There's mail for you," Maria said, nodding toward an envelope on the table. "Looks official." Lucas opened it to find a formal invitation to Montgomery Innovations' annual gala, a black-tie fundraiser for the company's foundation. His name was printed in elegant script, with a handwritten note at the bottom in Elise's distinctive handwriting. "Your presence would mean a lot. E." "What is it?" Maria asked, noticing his expression. "A work event," Lucas replied, showing her the invitation. "It's probably just a formality. They had to invite all staff." Maria studied the heavy cardstock with its embossed logo. "Looks fancy. Will you go?" Lucas hesitated. The gala represented yet another threshold to cross, another space where his belonging would be questioned. "I don't know. I don't own a tuxedo, and these events are just for networking anyway." "If they invited you, they want you there," Maria said firmly. "We'll figure out the tuxedo. Your cousin Miguel got married last year. His suit might fit you with some alterations." The determination in his mother's voice surprised Lucas. She had been cautious about his involvement with Montgomery from the beginning. "You think I should go?" Maria sat down across from him, her expression serious. "Mijo, I've watched you these past weeks. This job, it's changing you." "That's what everyone keeps saying," Lucas muttered. "Let me finish," Maria continued gently. "It's changing you, but not in the way I feared. You stand taller. You speak with more confidence. You're seeing possibilities I never wanted you to think were out of reach." She took his hands in hers, her skin rough from years of manual labor. "Your father and I always wanted doors to open for you that were closed to us. Now they are opening. Don't let fear or pride keep you from walking through them." Lucas squeezed his mother's hands, a lump forming in his throat. "I don't want to become someone who looks down on where we come from." "That would never happen," Maria said with absolute certainty. "Your heart is too good. But you can honor where you come from while still going places we never could. That's not betrayal, Lucas. That's the point of all our sacrifices." Her words settled something in him, a permission he hadn't realized he'd been seeking. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll go to the gala." The decision made, Lucas faced a new challenge, navigating the unwritten social codes of high society. The following day at work, he hesitantly approached Julia, Elise's assistant, who had always been kind to him. "The invitation for the gala," he began awkwardly. "I've never been to anything like that. Is there a protocol I should know about?" Julia's expression was sympathetic. "First time at a black tie event? It can be intimidating." "That obvious, huh?" Lucas smiled ruefully. "Don't worry," she assured him. "I can give you a crash course in gala etiquette. The basic rules aren't complicated." Over lunch, Julia explained the fundamentals of formal events, from attire expectations to which fork to use for which course. Lucas took mental notes, determined not to embarrass himself or, worse, embarrass Elise by association. "One more thing," Julia said as they finished their meal. "People might speculate about why you've been invited, office gossip and all that." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Julia hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "There's been talk about your relationship with Ms. Montgomery. Nothing specific, just whispers about her special interest in your career." The implication hit Lucas like a physical blow. "That's ridiculous. She's my boss. She's twice my age." "I know that," Julia assured him quickly. And anyone who knows Ms. Montgomery knows she would never act inappropriately. But in corporate environments, people love to gossip, especially about powerful women. Just be prepared for some curious looks, that's all. The warning left Lucas unsettled. The idea that his presence at Montgomery might somehow damage Elise's reputation hadn't occurred to him. Their connection had always felt natural and uncomplicated, mentor and mentee, two people who recognized something in each other despite their different backgrounds. The suggestion of impropriety tainted that pure connection. When Lucas returned to his desk, he found an email from Elise requesting a meeting that afternoon to discuss the advisory committee's first official gathering. He responded affirmatively, but as the meeting time approached, he found himself unusually nervous, Julia's warning echoing in his mind. Elise was reviewing documents when he entered her office, her reading glasses perched on her nose in a way that made her look simultaneously authoritative and approachable. She looked up with a warm smile that eased some of his tension. "Lucas, come in. How are the preparations coming for next week's committee meeting?" They discussed logistics for 20 minutes, with Lucas providing updates on the venue, agenda, and community participants. Throughout the conversation, he was hyper-aware of their interactions, second-guessing every smile and casual remark in light of Julia's warning. As the meeting concluded, Elise asked, "Did you receive the invitation to the Foundation Gala?" "Yes," Lucas replied, careful to maintain a professional tone. "Thank you for including me." "Of course," Elise said. "The entire team working on the Solar Neighborhoods project will be there. It's an opportunity to showcase our new approach to the board and major donors." She paused, studying him. "You seem uncomfortable. Is everything all right?" Lucas hesitated, unsure whether to share Julia's warning. On one hand, Elise deserved to know what was being said. On the other, repeating the gossip felt somehow disrespectful. "Julia mentioned there might be speculation about why I've been invited," he finally said, choosing his words carefully. Understanding dawned in Elise's eyes, followed by a flash of anger quickly controlled. "Ah, office gossip. I should have anticipated that." She sighed, removing her glasses and pinching the bridge of her nose. "Lucas, I'm sorry you've been subjected to that. Unfortunately, it's an unavoidable aspect of corporate culture, particularly when a female CEO takes a particular interest in mentoring someone." "I don't want to cause problems for you," Lucas said quietly. "You're not the problem," Elise replied firmly. "The problem is a corporate environment that can't conceive of professional relationships that don't fit into neat conventional boxes." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "But I won't let gossip dictate how I run my company or who I choose to mentor." The conviction in her voice reassured Lucas, yet a shadow of doubt remained. The world they occupied was built on perceptions as much as realities. If enough people believed something inappropriate was happening, would it matter that the truth was entirely innocent? "So you still want me to attend the gala?" he asked. "Absolutely," Elise confirmed without hesitation. "Your work deserves recognition, and the project needs your voice in those conversations." She smiled, a hint of mischief entering her expression. "Besides, I think you'll enjoy watching some of our more traditional board members try to process new perspectives." Her confidence was contagious, and Lucas found himself smiling back. "In that case, I'll be there." As he left her office, Lucas felt a renewed determination. He wouldn't let whispers and speculation diminish this opportunity or taint his relationship with Elise. Their connection, whatever it was, deserved to be protected from those who couldn't understand it. The evening of the Montgomery Innovations Foundation Gala arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread for Lucas. His cousin Miguel's tuxedo had required significant alterations to fit his leaner frame, and even with his mother's skilled hands making the adjustments, it wasn't quite right. The sleeves were slightly too short, the fabric a touch too shiny, the overall effect not quite matching the designer formal wear he knew would be standard at the event. "You look so handsome," Maria said, her eyes suspiciously bright as Lucas emerged from his bedroom fully dressed. She straightened his bow tie with hands that trembled slightly. "Just like your father at our wedding." The comparison to his father made Lucas stand taller despite his insecurities about the borrowed tuxedo. "Thanks for fixing it, Mom. It looks great." "One more thing," Maria said, disappearing into her bedroom. She returned with a small box. "These were your father's. He'd want you to have them tonight." Inside were a pair of silver cufflinks, simple but elegant, with the initials DM engraved in flowing script. "Dad's cufflinks," Lucas murmured, running his finger over the initials. "He wore them on special occasions," Maria confirmed. "Job interviews, our wedding day, times when he wanted to present his best self to the world." Her eyes met his, conveying the significance of the gesture. "He would be so proud to see you wearing them tonight." As Lucas fastened the cufflinks, he felt a connection to his father that transcended the years since his death. David Matthews had never entered the world Lucas was about to step into, but he had always believed his son would go further than he could. Wearing his cufflinks felt like carrying his father's blessing into that unfamiliar territory. A car horn sounded outside, the rideshare Lucas had splurged on rather than arriving at the West Hill Grand Hotel via public transportation. Maria hugged him tightly. "Remember who you are," she whispered, "but don't be afraid to become more." The drive to the hotel passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Lucas rehearsed Julia's etiquette tips in his mind. Start with the outermost silverware and work inward. Never reach across the table. Small sips of wine only if offered. Business discussions are acceptable, but politics should be avoided. The West Hill Grand stood like a gleaming monument to luxury, its facade illuminated against the night sky. A line of expensive cars disgorged passengers in formal attire, the women in flowing gowns, the men in impeccable tuxedos that made Lucas's borrowed outfit feel even more inadequate. For a moment, standing on the sidewalk, Lucas considered turning back. What was he doing here, pretending to belong among people who had been born into privilege he could barely comprehend? Then he felt the weight of his father's cufflinks against his wrists and remembered his mother's words. Taking a deep breath, he walked up the carpeted steps to the entrance. The ballroom was a cathedral of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, floral arrangements taller than Lucas, string quartet playing softly in the corner, waitstaff circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Lucas accepted a glass of sparkling water, grateful for something to hold as he scanned the room for familiar faces. "Matthews, you made it!" Director Rivera approached, elegant in a deep blue gown. "First Foundation Gala?" Lucas nodded, trying not to appear as overwhelmed as he felt. "It's quite something." "It's excessive," Rivera replied with a conspiratorial smile, "but it gets donors to open their checkbooks, so we play along." She gestured toward a group across the room. "Come meet some board members. They've been hearing about your work on the Solar Neighborhoods project." Following Rivera through the crowd, Lucas caught glimpses of Montgomery's elite mingling with city officials and business leaders. He recognized the mayor, several state representatives, and even a nationally known tech entrepreneur deep in conversation with Howard Chen. "Ah, here's our rising star," Howard said as they approached, interrupting his conversation to greet Lucas. "Matthews, meet James Wu, founder of Quantum Leap Technologies. James, this is Lucas Matthews, the intern I was telling you about." Lucas shook hands with the tech mogul, whose casual demeanor belied his billionaire status. "Howard mentioned you're considering engineering programs," Wu said. "Any interest in clean tech specifically?" "Definitely," Lucas replied, surprised by the direct question. "Especially solar applications in urban environments. There's so much untapped potential in retrofitting existing structures rather than just focusing on new construction." Wu's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Most young engineers want to build shiny new things, but the real impact comes from improving what's already there." He handed Lucas a business card. Send me your college applications. I have some connections at MIT's sustainability program." Before Lucas could process this unexpected development, Rivera was guiding him toward another group. "The board members are over here. Remember, they control the funding for the Solar Neighborhoods project, so emphasize community engagement and long-term impact." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of introductions and conversations. Lucas described the Eastwood Community Forum to increasingly interested executives, careful to credit Elise's leadership while highlighting the innovative approach they'd developed together. To his surprise, his nervousness faded as he spoke about the project. This was something he genuinely understood and cared about, and that authenticity resonated even in this rarefied environment. "So you're the famous Lucas Matthews," a familiar voice interrupted as he finished speaking with a board member. Charlotte Montgomery stood before him in a stunning red gown, her resemblance to Elise evident despite her more conventional beauty. "My sister has mentioned you, quite frequently in fact." "Ms. Montgomery," Lucas acknowledged, remembering that Charlotte was Elise's younger sister. "It's nice to meet you." Charlotte studied him with undisguised curiosity. "Elise says you've revolutionized our approach to community projects. That's high praise from someone who rarely offers it." "She's been an incredible mentor," Lucas replied carefully, aware that Bradford might have shared his unflattering assessment of the charity case intern. "Has she?" Charlotte's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "My sister doesn't usually take such a personal interest in interns, but then, you're not the usual intern, are you?" Before Lucas could respond to the loaded question, Charlotte's attention shifted. "Ah, here she is now." Lucas turned to see Elise approaching, and for a moment he forgot his surroundings entirely. She wore a deep green gown that complemented her eyes, her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. There was a quiet confidence in her bearing that drew attention without demanding it, power worn comfortably rather than flaunted. "Lucas," she greeted him warmly, "I'm glad you could make it. I see you've met my sister." "We were just getting acquainted," Charlotte confirmed, her gaze moving between them with unveiled interest. "Your protégé has been making quite an impression on the board." "I'm not surprised," Elise replied, her pride evident. "Lucas has an exceptional ability to bridge perspectives that typically remain separated." Charlotte's eyebrows rose slightly at her sister's praise. "Well, I should find Bradford. He's around here somewhere, probably boring someone about tax incentives for historic properties." She touched Elise's arm briefly. "Mother's asking for you. She's at table 3. As Charlotte moved away, Elise turned to Lucas with an apologetic smile. "My sister means well, but subtlety isn't her strong suit. How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," Lucas admitted. "Everyone's been surprisingly receptive to the community engagement approach." "Because it's working," Elise said simply. "Results speak louder than theories in this crowd." She glanced around the ballroom. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it? All this wealth in one room?" Lucas nodded, appreciating her acknowledgement of the overwhelming opulence. "I keep thinking about what this one night costs compared to what families in Eastwood live on for months." Instead of the defensive response such an observation might typically provoke, Elise nodded thoughtfully. "It's a valid point. The foundation does important work, but the contrast is stark. Perhaps that's something we should address more directly in our philanthropy." Her willingness to consider his perspective, even when it implied criticism, reinforced Lucas's growing admiration for her. Elise Montgomery might move comfortably in this world of wealth and power, but she hadn't been blinded by it. "Would you like to meet my mother?" Elise asked, gesturing toward an elegant older woman seated at a nearby table. "She's been asking about you." The prospect of meeting Elise's mother, clearly a society matriarch from her bearing and the deference shown by those around her, was intimidating, but Lucas nodded. "I'd be honored." As they made their way across the ballroom, Lucas noticed Bradford watching them, his expression coldly assessing. Near him stood Tanya Rodriguez, looking uncomfortable but determined in a simple black dress, clearly invited as part of the Community Advisory Committee but struggling to navigate the unfamiliar social landscape. "Ms. Rodriguez is here," Lucas noted, surprised. "I invited the entire advisory committee," Elise explained. "It's important for donors to hear directly from community representatives, not just corporate interpretations." The thoughtfulness of the gesture impressed Lucas once again. Elise wasn't just talking about bridging worlds. She was actively creating spaces where that could happen. Margaret Montgomery received them with practiced grace, her shrewd eyes taking in Lucas's borrowed tuxedo and earnest demeanor. "So you're the young man Elise has been mentoring. She tells me you've brought a fresh perspective to the Solar Neighborhoods project." "Lucas has been instrumental in reshaping our approach," Elise confirmed, the pride in her voice unmistakable. Margaret's gaze sharpened. "And what do you hope to gain from this internship, young man, besides the obvious professional experience?" The directness of the question momentarily caught Lucas off guard, but he answered honestly. "A chance to help create change in communities like mine, to show that corporate investment can benefit neighborhoods without displacing the people who live there." Margaret nodded slowly, seeming to find something satisfactory in his response. Idealism tempered with pragmatism. Refreshing. She turned to Elise. "Your father would have approved of this one. He always said the company needed more people who understood the real world beyond boardrooms." The comparison to Elise's father, clearly intended as high praise, created a warm moment between the three of them, interrupted when the dinner chimes sounded. Lucas was seated at a table with other members of the community outreach team, while Elise joined her family and board members at the head table. Throughout the elaborate meal, Lucas was conscious of eyes occasionally turning his way, some curious, some approving, some openly skeptical. The borrowed tuxedo and his evident unfamiliarity with certain social codes marked him as an outsider, yet the growing recognition of his contributions to the Solar Neighborhoods project provided a counterbalance of professional respect. After dinner, as the formal program began with speeches about the Foundation's work, Lucas excused himself for a brief respite from the intensity of the evening. He found a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights, the cool night air a relief after the crowded ballroom. "Needed an escape too?" Elise's voice came from the shadows. She was leaning against the balcony railing, her profile illuminated by the city below. "Just a short break," Lucas admitted, joining her at the railing. "It's a lot to process." Elise nodded, understanding. "These events are exhausting even for those of us who grew up attending them. But you've navigated it beautifully. I've heard nothing but positive feedback about your conversations with the board." "Really?" Lucas couldn't hide his surprise. "Even in this tuxedo?" Elise laughed softly. "The tuxedo is fine, and what matters is what you've said, not what you're wearing." She turned to face him, her expression growing serious. "You've proven tonight what I've known since our first real conversation. You belong in rooms where decisions are made. Your voice matters there." The validation, coming from someone whose opinion he valued so deeply, settled something in Lucas. Standing on that balcony, the city spread before them like a map of possibilities. He could almost believe her, that his perspective mattered, that he could maintain his connection to Eastwood while still moving through worlds his parents had never entered. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing something in me that day, for taking a chance." It wasn't charity, Lucas. It was recognition. Elise's eyes held his, conveying a sincerity that transcended professional mentorship. Sometimes people come into our lives unexpectedly and change everything. That day in the rain, you reminded me of what matters beyond profit margins and market share. You gave me a gift. I'm just returning the favor. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken meaning. They stood not as CEO and intern, but as two people who had somehow found in each other something essential, a reminder of purpose, a recognition of possibility, a connection that defied conventional categories. The balcony door opened, breaking the moment. "There you are," Charlotte said, her gaze moving between them with undisguised interest. "They're about to announce the foundation grants. You're needed inside, Elise." With a last meaningful glance at Lucas, Elise followed her sister back to the ballroom. Lucas remained on the balcony for another moment, processing the exchange. Something had shifted between them tonight, though he couldn't quite define what. The lines between professional and personal, mentor and friend, seemed to be blurring in ways both exhilarating and concerning. As he returned to the ballroom for the remainder of the program, Lucas noticed Bradford watching him with cold calculation. The look was a stark reminder that not everyone approved of his presence in this world, or of the special connection he shared with Elise Montgomery. The morning after the gala, Lucas awoke to his phone buzzing with notifications. A local business publication had covered the Montgomery Foundation event, prominently featuring a photo of him in conversation with James Wu and Howard Chen. The caption identified him as Lucas Matthews, architect of Montgomery Innovations' groundbreaking community engagement strategy for the Solar Neighborhoods project. He stared at the image in disbelief. The borrowed tuxedo looked better in the photograph than it had felt in person, and his expression conveyed a confidence he hadn't realized he possessed. Most surprising was the description: architect of the strategy, not merely an intern who had contributed. The article went on to quote board members praising the innovative approach and specifically mentioning Lucas's insights as transformative. "Look at you," his mother said, peering over his shoulder at the article. "My son," in the business section. There was pride in her voice, but something else too. A hint of melancholy, perhaps, at how quickly he was moving into a world she would never fully understand. "It's exaggerated," Lucas said, uncomfortable with the credit. "Ms. Montgomery is the one who approved the approach. I just suggested some modifications." Maria squeezed his shoulder. "Take the win, mijo. You earned it." At school that day, the article transformed Lucas's social standing. Classmates who had barely acknowledged him previously now approached with curious questions about Montgomery Innovations and the gala. Teachers who had always seen potential in him seemed vindicated, as if his corporate success validated their faith in his abilities. "MIT, huh?" Mr. Harrison, his physics teacher, remarked after class. "I saw you talking to James Wu in that photo. He's an MIT alum, isn't he?" Lucas nodded, still processing the idea himself. "He offered to help with my application." "Good. You've always belonged at a top-tier program. Your understanding of practical applications puts you ahead of students with perfect GPAs but no real-world experience." The validation from a teacher he respected meant more than the newfound attention from peers. Yet, as the day progressed, Lucas found himself increasingly uncomfortable with how the article had positioned him, as someone exceptional, separate from his community, absorbed into the corporate world. This discomfort deepened when he arrived at Montgomery Innovations that afternoon. Colleagues who had previously treated him as merely another intern now approached with congratulations and questions about the gala. The article had apparently circulated widely through company email chains, complete with speculation about his meteoric rise and special relationship with the CEO. "There he is, Montgomery's community whisperer," called one executive as Lucas passed the break room. The nickname, though seemingly affectionate, carried undertones that made Lucas uneasy, as if his value lay primarily in his background rather than his capabilities. Director Rivera pulled him aside before the afternoon's project meeting. "Just a heads up," she said quietly. "The board was impressed with you at the gala, which is excellent news for the Solar Neighborhoods project. But success comes with scrutiny. Bradford Hamilton has been asking questions about your qualifications and how you were selected for the internship." Lucas's stomach tightened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind designed to suggest impropriety," Rivera replied, her expression grim. "He's implying that your position is based on Elise's personal interest rather than merit." "That's ridiculous," Lucas protested, though the suggestion aligned with the whispers he'd heard since joining Montgomery. "I was hired because of my perspective on community engagement. "I know that," Rivera assured him, "and so does anyone who's worked with you. But Hamilton has the ear of several board members, and he seems determined to create problems." She studied Lucas with concern. "Just be careful. Document everything, maintain appropriate professional boundaries, and let your work speak for itself." The warning cast a shadow over the afternoon. During the project meeting, Lucas found himself second-guessing every interaction, hyper-aware of how his suggestions might be perceived. When Elise stopped by briefly to check on their progress, he deliberately maintained a formal distance, referring to her as Ms. Montgomery and avoiding the easy rapport they had developed. If Elise noticed the change, she gave no indication during the meeting. But afterward, as the team dispersed, she asked Lucas to remain behind. "Is everything all right?" she asked once they were alone. "You seemed unusually reserved today." Lucas hesitated, reluctant to mention Bradford's insinuations, yet unwilling to be dishonest with her. "Director Rivera mentioned that some board members have questions about my selection for the internship." Elise's expression hardened. "Bradford," she said, not a question but a confirmation. "He's been making noise since the gala. I should have anticipated this." "It's creating a complicated situation," Lucas acknowledged carefully. "The article this morning positioned me as more central to the project than I am, and combined with the attention at the gala. You're concerned about perception," Elise finished for him, understanding immediately, "about how our professional relationship is being viewed." Lucas nodded, relieved that she grasped the issue without him having to articulate it more explicitly. "I don't want to create problems for you, or for the project." Elise was silent for a moment, her expression contemplative. "The easiest solution would be to reassign you to another department, away from projects I'm directly involved with." She held up a hand when Lucas started to respond. "But I won't do that. Your work on solar neighborhoods is too valuable, and I won't let Bradford's pettiness derail what we're building." "What's his issue anyway?" Lucas asked, genuinely puzzled by the man's apparent vendetta. "I barely know him." Elise sighed, seeming to debate how much to share. "It's complicated. Partly it's about control. Bradford's family foundation is a major donor to Montgomery, and he's used to having influence over our charitable initiatives. The Solar Neighborhoods project is proceeding without his input, which he resents." She paused, then added more quietly, "And partly it's personal. Bradford and I have history that predates his engagement to Charlotte. He doesn't like being reminded that I chose career over a relationship with him, especially when he sees me investing time in mentoring someone else." The revelation of past involvement between Elise and Bradford added a dimension to the situation that Lucas hadn't considered. "So, this is about wounded pride?" "That's part of it," Elise acknowledged. "But it doesn't change our approach. We continue doing excellent work, maintain appropriate professional boundaries, and let the results speak for themselves." She smiled slightly. "And perhaps we're a bit more strategic about public appearances for a while." The practical solution eased some of Lucas's anxiety, though he couldn't help feeling that something valuable had been lost. The easy, natural connection they had shared on the balcony the previous night seemed suddenly more distant, constrained by corporate politics and personal agendas. "I should get back to my desk," he said, professional mask firmly in place. "The advisory committee is meeting tomorrow, and I need to finalize the presentation." Elise nodded, her own expression carefully neutral. "Of course. Keep me updated on the committee's feedback." As Lucas walked away, he felt the weight of watchful eyes, colleagues noting the closed-door conversation, perhaps adding it to the growing narrative about his relationship with the CEO. The unfairness of it stung. His work was being overshadowed by gossip, his legitimate contributions undermined by insinuations about how he had earned his position. That evening, needing perspective, Lucas sought out Tanya Rodriguez at the community center where she ran after-school programs. He found her in the computer lab, helping teenagers with college applications. "Well, if it isn't Montgomery's star intern," she greeted him, though her tone held more curiosity than criticism. That was quite an event last night. Can we talk? Lucas asked, gesturing toward the hallway. Once they were alone, Tanya's expression softened. You look stressed. Corporate world not as glamorous up close? It's complicated, Lucas admitted. The project is going well. The advisory committee has real input. The company is listening, but there's all this politics around my involvement. Tanya nodded, unsurprised. That tracks. You're disrupting their usual way of operating. Of course there's pushback. It's more than that, Lucas said, unsure how to explain without betraying confidences. There are suggestions that my position isn't based on merit, that it's personal. Understanding dawned in Tanya's expression. Ah, the CEO. I noticed how she looks at you. Lucas felt heat rise in his face. It's not like that. She's my mentor, nothing more. I believe you, Tanya said, holding up her hands. But perception matters in both worlds, Lucas. Here in Eastwood, people see you rising quickly, associating with power. Some will be proud, others suspicious. In the corporate world, they see an unconventional connection between a CEO and an intern from the wrong side of town. They'll create narratives to explain it. Her assessment was uncomfortably accurate. So what do I do? Ask yourself what matters most, Tanya advised. Is it the perception or the impact? If the Solar Neighborhoods project succeeds, if it delivers real benefits to families here without pushing them out, does it matter what people whisper about how it happened? The question cut through Lucas's anxiety, reminding him of the larger purpose behind his work at Montgomery. No, he said firmly. The outcome matters more than the gossip. Tanya smiled approvingly. Then focus on that. Make the project too successful to question. Create a model that Montgomery and other companies will have to follow in the future. That's how real change happens. As Lucas left the community center, Tanya's advice settled into a kind of clarity. He couldn't control what others thought about his relationship with Elise or his position at Montgomery, but he could control his work, his integrity, and his commitment to ensuring that the Solar Neighborhoods project delivered on its promises to Eastwood. The next day, facing the advisory committee with this renewed sense of purpose, Lucas delivered the most confident presentation of his life. He acknowledged concerns transparently, presented options clearly, and facilitated genuine dialogue between Montgomery representatives and community members. By the meeting's end, even the most skeptical committee members were engaged in productive planning. Impressive work, Rivera commented afterward. You didn't just manage the meeting, you built consensus where none seemed possible. That's his superpower, said Mrs. Diaz, who had joined the committee representing local businesses. Our boy knows how to make different worlds understand each other. The possessive "our boy" struck Lucas powerfully, a reminder that despite his growing role at Montgomery, he was still claimed by Eastwood, still belonged to the community that had shaped him. Rather than feeling torn between worlds, in that moment he felt like a bridge between them, his identity not divided but expanded by straddling different spheres. As the committee members departed, Lucas noticed a man observing from the back of the room, Bradford Hamilton, his expression unreadable as he watched the successful collaboration Lucas had facilitated. Their eyes met briefly, Bradford's cold assessment meeting Lucas's steady gaze. Then Bradford turned and left without a word, the implicit challenge hanging in the air between them. Later that day, as Lucas was compiling notes from the meeting, Howard Chen stopped by his desk. The committee meeting was a success? Very, Lucas confirmed. We've got agreement on the implementation timeline and community participation structure. Howard nodded approvingly. Good. By the way, I spoke with James Wu. He's serious about helping with your MIT application. Said you showed more practical understanding of community integration than most of his graduate engineers. The casual mention of MIT, delivered as if Lucas's acceptance at an elite university was a foregone conclusion, highlighted how dramatically his perceived trajectory had shifted in recent weeks. The change was exhilarating but also disorienting, as if he were being carried by a current much stronger than he had anticipated when he first accepted Elise's internship offer. "Thanks," Lucas replied, struggling to process the implication. "I'm still considering options." Howard raised an eyebrow. "Don't overthink it, Matthews. Opportunities like this don't come along often. Wu's endorsement practically guarantees admission and a scholarship." As Howard walked away, Lucas sat back in his chair, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. The path before him was opening in ways he had never imagined possible. MIT, a career in sustainable energy, a future far beyond the limitations he had grown up accepting as inevitable. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something essential hung in the balance, not just his relationship with his community or his unusual connection with Elise, but something deeper about who he was becoming and why. The ride that had begun with a simple act of kindness in the rain was carrying him toward a destination he could not yet clearly see. Spring bloomed across the city, transforming even the concrete expanses of Eastwood with surprising bursts of color. The Solar Neighborhoods project had moved from planning to implementation, with the first installations scheduled to begin in early May. Lucas divided his time between Montgomery Innovations and his final months of high school, balancing college applications, exam preparation, and his expanding responsibilities at the company. The MIT application had been submitted with glowing recommendations from Howard Chen, James Wu, and Elise herself. To Lucas's astonishment, he'd been accepted with a substantial scholarship that would cover most of his expenses. State University had also offered him a full ride, presenting him with a choice he'd never imagined having to make: the prestigious, world-class education at MIT that would open doors globally, or the solid local university where he could remain close to his mother and community. "You have to choose MIT," Maria insisted when the acceptance letter arrived. "This opportunity, it's what your father and I always dreamed of for you." "But it's so far away," Lucas argued, thinking of his mother alone in their apartment, working multiple jobs without him there to help. "And State's engineering program is still good." Maria took his face between her hands, her expression fierce with love and determination. "Listen to me, mijo. Parents sacrifice for their children not so they can stay close, but so they can go as far as their talents will take them. Your place is at MIT." Despite his mother's certainty, Lucas remained torn. The decision represented more than just a choice between universities. It felt like a choice between possible futures, between versions of himself that might never reconcile. At Montgomery, the Solar Neighborhoods project was gaining national attention. Business publications praised the innovative community engagement model, and several other companies had begun exploring similar approaches to their urban initiatives. What had started as a modest pilot program was becoming a template for corporate community partnerships. Yet as the project's profile rose, so did the opposition from certain quarters within Montgomery. Bradford Hamilton had moved from subtle questioning to open criticism, raising concerns at board meetings about the project's return on investment and questioning whether the extensive community input was delaying implementation unnecessarily. "We need to present a unified front at tomorrow's board meeting," Elise told the project team during their preparation session. "Bradford has been lobbying several board members to reduce the project's scope or redirect resources to more measurable initiatives." "On what grounds?" Rivera asked, frustration evident in her voice. "The project is on schedule and under budget. Community buy-in is at unprecedented levels." "That's precisely what bothers him," Elise replied, her expression grim. "This project is succeeding without his input or approval, using methods he didn't endorse. Success threatens his influence." Lucas, who had been taking notes on his laptop, looked up. "Is there something specific about the community engagement model he objects to? Maybe we could address his concerns directly." Elise and Rivera exchanged a glance that Lucas couldn't quite interpret. "It's more complicated than that," Elise said carefully. "Bradford has made it personal." The implication hung in the air. Over the past weeks, Lucas had noticed Bradford's criticisms increasingly focused on his role in the project. The questioning of his qualifications had evolved into more direct challenges about his influence over Elise's decision-making. "He's been meeting privately with board members," Elise continued, "suggesting that my judgment about the project is compromised by personal factors." "He means me," Lucas stated flatly, the reality he'd been avoiding now impossible to ignore. "He's using our working relationship to undermine the entire project." Elise nodded, not denying it. "Which is why I need you to prepare a comprehensive analysis of the community feedback process for tomorrow's meeting. Data-driven, meticulously documented, demonstrating the concrete benefits of your approach. We need to make this about results, not personalities." Lucas stayed late that night, compiling statistics, resident testimonials, and comparative analyses with traditional corporate outreach methods. The resulting presentation was thorough and compelling, transforming subjective impressions of success into quantifiable metrics that even the most skeptical board member would have difficulty dismissing. As the office emptied and night settled over the city, Elise stopped by his desk, coffee in hand. "You should go home, Lucas. You've done enough." He shook his head, focused on fine-tuning a graph showing correlation between community input and implementation efficiency. "I need to make sure this is irrefutable. Too much is riding on it." Elise set the coffee beside him and pulled up a chair. "You know, when I first offered you the internship, I never imagined we'd be here, defending a revolutionary approach to community development against internal opposition." "Do you regret it?" Lucas asked, the question slipping out before he could reconsider. "Not for a second," Elise replied without hesitation. "What we're building here matters. It's changing how corporations interact with communities, creating a model that could be replicated nationwide." She paused, then added more softly, "And on a personal level, working with you has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career." The simple sincerity of her statement cut through Lucas's professional armor, reminding him of the genuine connection that had formed between them from that first bicycle ride. Despite all the complications that had followed, the gossip, Bradford's insinuations, the necessary professional boundaries, that core of authentic recognition remained. "I got into MIT," he said abruptly, unsure why he was sharing this now. "Full scholarship, thanks partly to Mr. Wu's recommendation." Elise's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Lucas, that's wonderful. Congratulations. MIT's sustainability program is world-class. This opens up so many possibilities for you." "I haven't decided yet," he admitted. "State also offered me a full ride." Elise studied him, understanding dawning in her expression. "You're torn between staying close to home and going where the opportunities are greatest." Lucas nodded, grateful for her immediate comprehension. "My mom says I should choose MIT without hesitation. That parents sacrifice so their children can go far, but it feels like more than just a university choice," Elise finished for him. "It feels like choosing between worlds." "Exactly." The relief of being understood was profound. "If I go to MIT surrounded by people who've never had to worry about paying bills or helping their single parent make rent, will I still be me? Will I still understand the issues that matter to places like Eastwood?" Elise considered his question carefully. "I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you that who you are, your perspective, your values, your understanding of both worlds, that's formed by more than geography. You won't stop being Lucas Matthews because you're in Cambridge instead of here." Her words resonated with something his mother had said months earlier. "Don't forget who you are, but don't be afraid to become more." They worked side by side for another hour, refining the presentation until it was unassailable. As they were preparing to leave, Elise's phone rang. Her expression changed as she listened to the caller, concern giving way to alarm. "When?" she asked sharply. "Who authorized that without consulting the community team?" She listened again, then said, "Stall them. Tell them there's been a procedural error. I'll handle it first thing tomorrow." She hung up, her expression thunderous. Bradford convinced the development office to begin preliminary work at the Eastwood site tomorrow morning, without notifying the advisory committee or following the community protocols we established. Lucas stared at her in disbelief. He can't do that. We promised the committee nothing would happen without prior notification and community observers present. Apparently, he told the development team that the excessive community processes were being streamlined to accelerate implementation. Elise's voice was tight with controlled anger. This is deliberate sabotage. He knows how important the trust-building process has been. What happens if Montgomery crews just show up tomorrow and start work? Lucas asked, though he already knew the answer. We lose credibility. The trust we've built evaporates. Elise ran a hand through her hair, a rare gesture of frustration. Even if we explain it was a miscommunication, the damage will be done. Bradford knows that. Lucas checked the time. Nearly midnight. We need to notify the advisory committee now. I can call Tanya and Mrs. Diaz at least. They can spread the word that this wasn't authorized and that the proper process will be followed. At midnight? Won't that cause more alarm? Less than if trucks and workers show up unannounced at 7 a.m., Lucas countered. The community has been burned too many times by corporations that make promises and then change plans overnight. They'll understand an awkward late call more than they'll forgive an unannounced work crew. Elise nodded, accepting his judgment about the community he knew intimately. Make the calls. I'll deal with Bradford and the board. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Lucas contacted key advisory committee members, explaining the situation and assuring them that Elise was personally intervening to halt the unauthorized work. Tanya immediately mobilized community observers to be on site before dawn, not in protest, but as a precautionary presence. Mrs. Diaz promised to provide coffee and breakfast, transforming potential confrontation into community vigilance. Meanwhile, Elise made a series of increasingly forceful calls to board members, the development team, and finally to Bradford himself. Lucas could hear only her side of the conversation, but her controlled fury was evident. "This ends now, Bradford," she said, her voice glacial. "You've crossed from corporate politics into deliberate sabotage of a company initiative. The board will hear about this in detail tomorrow, including how you attempted to circumvent established protocols for what appears to be personal vendetta." By 4 a.m, they had managed to halt the planned work and arrange for proper community notification and involvement before any implementation began. Exhausted but satisfied, they gathered their things to finally head home for a few hours of sleep before the board meeting. "Thank you," Elise said as they waited for the elevator. "Your quick thinking and community connections saved us from a significant setback." "We make a good team," Lucas replied, the simple truth of it transcending all the complicated dynamics between them. The elevator doors opened, revealing Bradford Hamilton. His presence in the building at this hour was so unexpected that both Elise and Lucas momentarily froze. "Working late?" Bradford asked, his tone falsely casual as he stepped off the elevator. "Or should I say early? Quite the dedication to the project." "What are you doing here, Bradford?" Elise asked directly. "I was notified of some last-minute changes to the Eastwood implementation schedule," he replied smoothly. "Thought I'd check the details before the board meeting since I'll be raising questions about project management." His gaze shifted to Lucas. "Interesting that I find you both here at 4 a.m. The board might find that noteworthy as well." The insinuation was unmistakable. Lucas felt a surge of anger at the deliberate attempt to twist innocent circumstances into something unsavory. "We're here," Elise said evenly, "because we had to mitigate the damage from your unauthorized interference with established project protocols, an interference that nearly destroyed months of community trust building." Bradford's expression hardened. "The board authorized me to explore expediting implementation. The community hand-holding has gone on long enough." "The board authorized no such thing," Elise countered. "I've already spoken with the chairman, but we can discuss this further at the meeting in a few hours." She stepped into the elevator, Lucas following. For now, Mr. Matthews and I are both going home to prepare for what promises to be an enlightening discussion about project governance." As the elevator doors closed on Bradford's taut face, Lucas released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "He planned this," he said quietly. "He wanted to find us here together in the early morning." "Of course he did," Elise agreed, fatigue evident in her voice. "Bradford has always been skilled at creating compromising scenarios. It's why I ended our relationship years ago. His manipulation became increasingly transparent." The casual reference to their past relationship reminded Lucas of the complex history that preceded his arrival at Montgomery. Elise had navigated these corporate waters for years before he appeared, dealing with personal and professional challenges he was only beginning to understand. "Will this cause problems at the board meeting?" he asked as they reached the lobby. Elise considered the question. "Bradford will attempt to use it, certainly. But his sabotage of the project is the more serious issue. The board may question my judgment in personal matters, but they respect results. And the Solar Neighborhoods project is delivering those." Outside, the city was still dark, though the first hints of dawn softened the eastern sky. They stood for a moment in the quiet street, both too exhausted to immediately part ways, yet aware that arriving together at the board meeting later would only fuel Bradford's insinuations. "Get some rest," Elise said finally. "The presentation is solid. The project's success speaks for itself." Lucas nodded, though concern still creased his brow. "And if Bradford makes this personal?" Elise's expression was resolute. "Then I'll remind the board that my personal life is my own business, as long as the company prospers under my leadership, which it has, considerably." As they parted ways, Elise to her waiting car service, Lucas to the early morning bus stop, he felt the weight of the coming confrontation. Bradford's opposition had escalated from professional disagreement to personal attack, threatening not just the project but Elise's leadership and Lucas's future. The board meeting would determine more than just the fate of the Solar Neighborhoods project. It would set the course for all their interconnected paths. The Montgomery Innovations boardroom had never felt so charged with tension. Executive team members sat along one wall, board directors along the other, with Elise at the head of the table. Lucas, seated with the project team, could feel Bradford's gaze from across the room, calculating, confident, as if victory were already assured. After brief preliminaries, Bradford launched his attack, presenting what he called serious concerns about project management and corporate governance in the Solar Neighborhoods initiative. His presentation was skillfully constructed, framing the community engagement approach as inefficient and the timeline as unnecessarily prolonged. "While the concept is admirable," Bradford concluded, "we must question whether personal factors have influenced decision-making, potentially compromising shareholder value." His eyes flicked meaningfully toward Lucas. When executives develop inappropriate attachments to subordinates, judgment can become clouded. The insinuation hung in the air, its intended damage multiplied by the early morning encounter he had engineered. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton," said Margaret Montgomery, who had remained silent until now. As the former CEO's widow and a significant shareholder, her opinion carried substantial weight. "Before we continue, I'd like to hear from the project team directly." Elise nodded to Rivera, who presented their quarterly results: community participation metrics, implementation timelines, budget adherence. The data was compelling, but Lucas could see several board members remained troubled by Bradford's insinuations, their attention drifting toward him with poorly disguised curiosity. When Rivera finished, Margaret turned to Lucas. "Mr. Matthews, you've been instrumental in developing the community engagement model. Would you address Mr. Hamilton's concerns about its efficiency?" The direct question from Elise's mother momentarily startled Lucas. He hadn't expected to speak at the board meeting, but as he stood, he realized this was precisely the moment he had been preparing for since joining Montgomery. This was his chance to defend not just the project, but the bridge he had helped build between corporate interests and community needs. The traditional approach to community projects, Lucas began, his voice steadier than he felt, treats efficiency and community engagement as opposing values. You can have one or the other, but not both. Our data tells a different story. He displayed his meticulously prepared slides showing how early community involvement had prevented costly mistakes and reduced implementation delays. By investing time up front in genuine dialogue, we've avoided the pitfalls that typically plague urban development projects: community resistance, regulatory complications, and misaligned expectations. As he presented, Lucas felt a familiar clarity emerging, the same certainty he'd experienced during the community forum. He wasn't just an intern defending a project. He was a bridge builder demonstrating the value of connection across different worlds. Traditional corporate thinking views community members as obstacles to be managed, he concluded. We've reimagined them as essential partners in the design process. The result isn't just a more harmonious relationship, it's a more effective business model with sustainable long-term benefits for both Montgomery Innovations and the communities we serve. When he finished, the room was silent. Even Bradford seemed momentarily at a loss for a rebuttal. Then the chairman spoke up. "These results are impressive, Ms. Montgomery. The approach appears to be working." Bradford recovered quickly. "The results are preliminary, and they don't address the concerning personal dynamics that may have influenced project leadership." He placed a folder on the table. "I've documented several instances of unusual favoritism toward Mr. Matthews, including late-night meetings, private consultations, and special accommodations not afforded to other interns." Lucas felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment. Bradford had been building this case methodically, transforming a genuine mentorship into something tawdry. Before Elise could respond, Margaret Montgomery spoke again. "Are you suggesting, Bradford, that my daughter's professional judgment has been compromised by personal feelings?" Bradford tempered his expression to one of regretful concern. "I'm merely raising questions about corporate governance and appropriate boundaries. The board has a fiduciary duty to ensure decisions are made objectively." "Indeed we do," Margaret agreed. "Which is why I find your presentation troubling, not for what it reveals about Elise's judgment, but for what it demonstrates about yours." She opened a folder of her own. "You've been documenting Elise and Mr. Matthews for months, apparently. What you haven't disclosed is your personal conflict of interest in this matter." She distributed documents to the board members. "These are records of your attempts to redirect the Solar Neighborhoods project to developers connected to your family's foundation. And these," she slid another set of papers across the table, "are transcripts of your conversations with development staff, explicitly instructing them to bypass established protocols without board authorization." Bradford's confident expression faltered. "Those were informal suggestions to expedite implementation." "They were deliberate attempts to sabotage a successful initiative," Margaret countered, "motivated by personal animosity and financial self-interest." She turned to the other board members. "I move that Mr. Hamilton recuse himself from all decisions regarding the Solar Neighborhoods project due to demonstrated conflict of interest." The vote was swift and decisive. Bradford, his face rigid with controlled fury, gathered his materials and left the room without further comment. The remainder of the meeting proceeded with detailed discussion of project expansion, additional funding, and potential application of the community engagement model to other Montgomery initiatives. When it concluded, the board had not only reaffirmed support for the current approach but approved resources for extending it to 3 additional neighborhoods. As the boardroom emptied, Elise approached Lucas. "That was masterfully handled," she said quietly. "You spoke to their concerns without getting defensive or personal." "I learned from the best," Lucas replied, the victory bittersweet. Despite the project's validation, Bradford's insinuations had created a subtle but perceptible shift in how others viewed their relationship. The easy connection they had shared seemed suddenly fragile, threatened by corporate politics and unspoken boundaries. "We should talk," Elise said, sensing his discomfort, "but not here. Too many ears." Later that afternoon, they met on neutral ground, the same community center where the Eastwood Forum had been held. The space was empty between programs, the afternoon sun streaming through dusty windows onto folding tables and well-worn chairs. Bradford's tactics were despicable, Elise began. But they've created a situation we need to address. People are watching us more closely now, looking for confirmation of his insinuations. Lucas nodded, the unfairness of it still rankling. So we maintain professional distance, limit one-on-one meetings, document all interactions? That's the conventional approach, Elise agreed, though her expression suggested dissatisfaction with it. But I'm not convinced it's the right one. Restricting a valuable mentorship because of gossip and innuendo feels like surrendering to exactly the kind of narrow thinking we've been fighting against. She paced the length of the room, struggling with the dilemma. The truth is, Lucas, I value our connection. Not in the way Bradford implied. That's absurd and offensive to us both. But I do care about your development, your perspective, your future, more than is perhaps typical in a professional context. The admission of personal investment, delivered with such honesty, touched Lucas deeply. I feel the same way, he said simply. You've changed how I see myself, what I believe is possible. Elise smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. So where does that leave us? How do we move forward without feeding the gossip mill or compromising the project? Lucas considered the question carefully. Maybe the answer isn't more distance, but more transparency. We continue working together, mentoring continues, but we bring others into the process more deliberately. Rivera, Howard, the community team, make our collaboration more visible and inclusive. A bridge rather than a barrier, Elise mused, appreciating the approach. It aligns with everything we've been trying to achieve with the project. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the community center floor. It was Elise who finally asked the question that had been hovering between them since Lucas received his acceptance letters. Have you decided? About university? Lucas took a deep breath. I'm going to MIT, he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke it aloud. After today, I understand even more clearly why I need to go. There are too few people who can translate between worlds, who understand both corporate boardrooms and community centers. I want to become even better at being that bridge. Elise's expression was a mixture of pride and something like wistfulness. MIT is the right choice. Your perspective is too valuable to limit. She hesitated, then added, I'll miss our collaboration, though. It doesn't have to end, Lucas pointed out. Montgomery has operations in Boston, and there are internships during breaks, remote projects. Are you proposing a long-distance professional relationship, Mr. Matthews? Elise asked, her tone lightening. I'm proposing we find a way to continue what we've started, Lucas answered seriously. This connection, this understanding between us, it's too important to just let go because I'm changing locations. Elise nodded, conviction replacing uncertainty in her expression. You're right. Geographic distance doesn't have to mean the end of meaningful collaboration, and perhaps with some space between us, the gossip will naturally dissipate. They began discussing practical arrangements, a formal mentorship program that could include regular video consultations, project collaborations that could involve MIT resources, potential expansion of the Solar Neighborhoods model to communities in the Boston area. The conversation flowed with the ease and creativity that had characterized their best work together, unhindered now by Bradford's shadow or corporate constraints. As they prepared to leave, Lucas found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple bicycle ride in the rain. I never imagined offering you a ride that day would lead to all this, he said, gesturing to encompass not just the room but all that had changed in both their lives. The smallest moments can alter our entire trajectory, Elise agreed. A chance encounter, an act of kindness, a decision to see beyond superficial differences. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed Eastwood in a golden light that softened its rough edges and highlighted its resilience. In the distance, the downtown skyline gleamed, no longer seeming like a separate world but rather another neighborhood connected to this one by invisible threads of relationship and possibility. "My bike's just around the corner," Lucas said, struck by a sudden impulse. "Want a ride for old time's sake?" Elise laughed, the sound uninhibited and genuine. "I'm wearing heels and a pencil skirt. We've overcome bigger obstacles," Lucas pointed out with a grin. Minutes later, they were speeding down the street, Elise balanced on the bike pegs, her hands on Lucas's shoulders, both of them laughing like children as they navigated the familiar route. Neighbors stared, some recognizing the CEO of Montgomery Innovations in this most undignified position, but neither Lucas nor Elise paid them any mind. In that moment, they were neither CEO and intern, mentor and protege, nor any of the other labels that had been assigned to their relationship. They were simply two people connected by mutual recognition and respect, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and freedom, of bridges built and boundaries transcended. As they rounded the corner toward the community center parking lot, Lucas felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. The future held uncertainty, MIT, new challenges, physical distance from both his mother and Elise, but the foundations they had built together would endure. The Solar Neighborhoods project would continue, their professional collaboration would evolve, and the understanding between them would remain a touchstone as he navigated new worlds. The ride that had changed everything hadn't ended. It had merely begun a new phase of the journey. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.